In the closing decades of the 19th century, the United States moved through a period of gradual transformation. The nation had emerged from the long shadows of civil war and Reconstruction, and it now entered an era shaped by quiet industrial growth, shifting economic rhythms, and the steady expansion of its presence in the wider world. Among the figures who rose during this time was William McKinley, a man whose life reflected the calm perseverance and disciplined public service characteristic of the age. His story unfolded across the gentle landscapes of Ohio, through the fields and small towns where he formed his earliest values, and eventually through the halls of government where he approached leadership with a composed, deliberate manner. McKinley's life touches many of the themes that defined America's passage into the 20th century. The experiences of a young soldier in the Civil War, the measured pursuit of legal and political work in peacetime, the careful stewardship of economic policies, and the quietly influential leadership that shaped his presidency. His journey reveals a gradual rise, steady rather than sudden, grounded in patience, reflection, and a belief in the responsibilities of public life. As we begin this gentle passage through his story, consider supporting this work by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing where in the world you're listening from tonight. Let the pace soften, the mind settle, and the narrative unfold at the unhurried rhythm of evening, guiding you into the restful quiet of William McKinley's early world. William McKinley was born on January 29, 1843, in the small industrial community of Niles, a region marked by modest homes, simple storefronts, and the quiet industry of families working steadily to support one another. His parents, William and Nancy McKinley, belonged to the long line of settlers who had come to Ohio seeking the balanced promise of fertile land, small-town fellowship, and the opportunity to build a stable life. The family carried with them traditions of Methodism, modesty, and personal discipline, values that gently shaped the boy's earliest days. The landscape of Niles in the mid-19th century offered a kind of calm regularity. Tree-lined roads wound through soft Ohio hills, and the slow rhythm of the seasons set the pace for community life. In this environment, young William grew surrounded by the steady routines of labour and learning. His father worked in iron production, a trade central to the region's quiet industrial growth, and his mother oversaw the household with calm guidance. Together they created a home shaped by warmth, structure, and a deep respect for education and faith. McKinley was the seventh of 9 children, and the close bonds among his siblings helped form his earlier sense of belonging. Their days were filled with the simple, familiar rhythms of family life, shared meals, quiet evenings, and the routines of school and chores. The children learned the importance of cooperation and patience, not through instruction alone, but through the gentle example set by their parents. Nancy McKinley in particular offered a steady moral influence. Her composed manner and thoughtful devotion to Methodist teachings left a lasting impression on her son, instilling in him a belief that character grew through daily acts of kindness, discipline, and reflection. As a boy, McKinley attended local schools where lessons unfolded in modest classrooms warmed by wood stoves and illuminated by tall windows that admitted soft morning light. Teachers emphasized reading, recitation, and arithmetic, subjects taught without haste, allowing students to absorb knowledge at a measured pace. William was quiet by nature, thoughtful rather than assertive, and he moved through these early lessons with calm attentiveness. His teachers recognized in him a gentle seriousness, a willingness to apply himself steadily to his work, and a readiness to help his classmates when needed. Outside the classroom, McKinley's world was shaped by the natural surroundings of northeastern Ohio. He spent time exploring fields, walking narrow footpaths between stands of oak and maple, and observing the slow turning of the seasons. These simple landscapes, marked by quiet beauty rather than dramatic vistas, offered him a sense of balance that would remain with him throughout his life. The gentle cycles of planting and harvest, the soft transitions from winter to spring, and the steady routines of small-town life helped shape his appreciation for order and continuity. Religious life formed an equally important part of McKinley's upbringing. Sundays were devoted to extended worship services, where hymns rose softly within the wooden walls of the local Methodist church. The sermons, delivered in measured tones, emphasized personal responsibility, quiet compassion, and a devotion to community that mirrored the values practiced at home. These weekly gatherings reinforced a worldview in which patient effort and moral steadiness guided one's path. McKinley absorbed these lessons not as rigid rules, but as familiar principles woven gently into daily life. As he entered adolescence, McKinley continued to grow within this calm environment. He developed a fondness for reading and study, often drawing insight from histories, sermons, and reflections on civic duty. His curiosity unfolded gradually, leading him to consider questions of community, ethics, and the responsibilities individuals bear toward one another. Though still young, he displayed a maturity that filtered through his actions, a readiness to assist his family, a quiet generosity toward friends, and an attentiveness to the needs of those around him. In 1852, when William was 9, the McKinley family moved to Poland, Ohio, a small but respected town known for its educational opportunities. The transition marked an expansion of his world, yet it maintained the same calm character he had known in Niles. The move reflected the family's hope to provide William and his siblings with broader schooling, reinforcing the belief that learning formed the foundation for future service. Thus, the early years of William McKinley's life unfolded in an atmosphere of gentle consistency, shaped by family, faith, and the modest routines of small-town Ohio. The values he carried forward from this period would guide him through the quiet perseverance of his youth, the challenges of war, and the long path toward leadership that lay ahead. When the McKinley family settled in Poland in 1852, William entered a new stage of life marked by gentle expansion rather than disruption. Poland was a calm community, known for its well-regarded academy, and for the steady influence of families devoted to education and quiet civic responsibility. The landscape resembled that of Niles, soft hills, tree-lined roads, and modest wooden homes, but the rhythms of life carried a slightly more scholarly tone. For young William, this environment offered room to grow academically, emotionally, and morally, shaping the traits that would accompany him through every chapter of his later life. The Poland Seminary, where McKinley soon enrolled, was a place of quiet discipline. Students gathered in simple classrooms whose tall windows admitted the pale Ohio light, the illuminating blackboards and long wooden desks polished by decades of use. Lessons unfolded at an unhurried pace, allowing reflection and understanding to develop naturally. Teachers expected diligence, yet rarely raised their voices. Instead, they created an atmosphere in which learning felt steady, orderly, and purposeful. William fit comfortably into this environment. Though not given to displays of brilliance or burst of confident assertion, he possessed a thoughtful seriousness that drew him gradually into deeper study. His interest in mathematics, history, and classical literature grew through gentle encouragement rather than pressure. He observed carefully, asked quiet questions when clarity was needed, and completed his lessons with reliable precision. His teachers recognized in him a student whose mind moved patiently, one step at a time, absorbing ideas with calm persistence. McKinley's classmates often remarked on his even temperament. He was neither withdrawn nor forceful, but balanced, pleasant in conversation, modest in his opinions and steady in his friendships. In group activities he rarely sought attention, yet his presence brought a sense of quiet reliability. He participated willingly, listened attentively, and helped unify discussions that might otherwise have drifted into disorder. This mixture of humility and practical steadiness would one day serve him well in political life, but at this time it appeared simply as the natural expression of a kind, self-possessed youth. The seminary placed equal emphasis on moral instruction, and McKinley's upbringing in the Methodist tradition made this dimension of education particularly familiar. His teachers spoke of responsibility, of the quiet sacrifices that strengthen a community, and of the importance of modest conduct. William absorbed these lessons gently, weaving them into the habits of mind he was already forming at home. He carried himself with calm respect, guided not by outward piety, but by a steady inner compass shaped through years of thoughtful instruction. Outside of school, the rhythms of Poland offered their own opportunities for growth. McKinley took long walks along the town's narrow lanes, observing the gradual turning of seasons, the shifting pattern of shadows beneath rows of maple trees, and the peaceful fields that bordered the community. These quiet landscapes provided room for reflection, allowing the young man to think about the world beyond Poland while remaining grounded in the life he knew so well. His family, now firmly settled, continued to support his education with gentle steadiness. His mother especially remained an encouraging presence, her calm strength shaping William's understanding of patience and purpose. As adolescence unfolded, McKinley began to consider the paths his life might take. The profession of teaching appealed to him, as did the discipline of law. His interest in public life also grew, not from ambition, but from observing the quiet responsibilities carried by those who served their communities. At the seminary, discussions of national affairs were common, particularly in the tense years leading up to the Civil War. These conversations unfolded without agitation, but with a sober awareness of the questions facing the country. William listened closely. He thought deeply about the meaning of union, duty, and citizenship, though he expressed his views sparingly, preferring contemplation over debate. The McKinley household maintained a calm, orderly routine during these years. Evenings often included reading aloud, quiet correspondence, or the simple companionship of family gathered around lamplight. These soothing routines nurtured William's sense of stability and strengthened the values he would carry into adulthood: devotion to family, respect for steady work, and a belief that thoughtful living could shape meaningful outcomes. As he approached graduation from the Poland seminary, McKinley remained uncertain about his exact path. Yet he moved forward with the assurance that comes from supportive surroundings. He briefly attended Allegheny College in Pennsylvania, but illness and financial strain led him to return home earlier than planned. These setbacks did not disrupt his progress. Instead, they revealed the resilience he had developed quietly over the years. He found temporary employment near Poland, teaching and assisting where needed, maintaining a sense of purpose even when his plans shifted. The nation, meanwhile, edged closer to conflict. The growing tensions between North and South, discussed with increasing seriousness in the seminary's classrooms and in the McKinley home, cast a long shadow over these final peaceful years of his youth. William felt the implications of these developments deeply. The values he had absorbed through family, faith, and community positioned him to view the preservation of the Union as a solemn responsibility. Yet he did not rush toward conclusions. He moved calmly through daily life, reflecting quietly, preparing inwardly for the demands that might come. By the spring of 1861, when word reached Poland that hostilities had broken out at Fort Sumter, McKinley understood that the world he had known was changing. The steady routines of his youth, the measured lessons of the seminary, and the calm moral guidance of his upbringing had prepared him in ways he could not have fully seen. These influences shaped the manner in which he would respond to the call of national service, deliberately, respectfully, and with the quiet courage that defined his earliest years. Thus, William McKinley's youth formed a foundation of gentle solidity. The soft-spoken boy from Niles had grown into a young man shaped by education, family, and faith, carrying forward a character marked by patience and thoughtful purpose. These formative experiences would soon guide him through the trials of war and the responsibilities of a life devoted to public service. When the first reports of conflict reached the quiet streets of Poland, William McKinley felt the steady pull of responsibility that had been forming throughout his youth. The country was shifting, slowly but unmistakably, into a moment that demanded clear choices. The calm routines of seminary life gave way to discussions filled with concern for the future of the Union, and even the gentle rhythms of family evenings were touched by the uncertainty settling across the nation. Though McKinley was still only 18, he sensed that the principles he had absorbed since childhood, duty, patience, and steady moral purpose, would soon be tested. The call for volunteers in the spring of 1861 reached Poland with a combination of solemnity and urgency. Local men gathered in quiet groups beneath the soft shade of familiar trees, speaking in low voices about enlistment and the responsibilities ahead. McKinley listened carefully to these conversations, weighing the gravity of the moment. He had no desire for heroism or adventure, but the preservation of the Union resonated with the core values nurtured through years of education and faith. After reflection, and with the calm certainty that guided his decisions, he chose to enlist in the 23rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry. When McKinley presented himself at the recruiting station, he appeared younger than his age, slender, soft-spoken, and marked by the gentle earnestness that had characterized him since childhood. Yet the officers recognized his sincerity, and he was accepted into the regiment as a private. His departure from home was quiet, lacking ceremony. His mother, though deeply concerned, understood the conviction behind his decision and offered him her steady blessing. The familiar streets of Poland faded behind him as he joined the formation of volunteers moving towards service. Life in the 23rd Ohio unfolded at a slow, deliberate pace. The regiment gathered at Camp Chase near Columbus, where wooden barracks, open drill fields, and the distant murmur of other mobilizing units created an atmosphere both new and strangely ordered. McKinley adapted to camp routines with characteristic patience. He rose with the early bugle call, he took instruction in drilling and marching, and learned the careful maintenance of his equipment. His superiors noted that he approached every task with attentive diligence, performing even the simplest duties, cleaning, carrying provisions, preparing camp, with quiet thoroughness. The presence of more experienced officers shaped these early weeks, none more influential than Colonel Rutherford B. Hayes, who would later become Governor of Ohio and President of the United States. Although McKinley did not stand out immediately, Hayes observed the young private's steady reliability. In an environment where many new volunteers struggled to adjust to military discipline, McKinley's calm acceptance of routine and his deliberate approach to learning made him a reassuring presence among his peers, where he quickly became known as someone who could be counted on, whether for a difficult errand, a night watch, or the steadying of morale among less settled recruits. When the regiment first moved into the field, McKinley witnessed landscapes far different from the quiet paths of Ohio. Forested hills, winding rivers, and the long, dusty roads of western Virginia shaped the early campaigns. The soldiers marched at a measured pace, halting for brief rest beneath the broad canopies of oak and chestnut trees. During these moments, McKinley often reflected on the calm of home, drawing upon those memories to maintain composure amid the unfamiliar surroundings of military life. The early engagements of the campaign were modest in scale, yet filled with tension for those experiencing battle for the first time. Yet McKinley's role initially centered on logistical support, transporting supplies, distributing rations, and ensuring that the regiment maintained the provisions necessary for sustained operations. Though these tasks carried none of the visibility associated with frontline combat, they were vital to the regiment's effectiveness. McKinley performed them with quiet dedication, often working late into the evening to ensure his comrades were properly supplied. These early responsibilities revealed his talent for measured organisation, a trait that would become increasingly important as the war progressed. His steadiness did not go unnoticed. Officers observed that he approached stressful situations with a composed manner, making him well suited for responsibilities requiring focus under pressure. Though as the regiment moved deeper into contested territory, McKinley was entrusted with more demanding assignments. He remained humble in the face of such recognition, viewing each new duty simply as another step in fulfilling the responsibilities he had accepted when he enlisted. During quiet moments between marches, McKinley wrote letters home. His words carried a tone of calm reassurance, reflecting his desire to spare his family unnecessary worry. He mentioned the routines of camp life, the camaraderie among the men, and his confidence in the cause for which he had enlisted. Even in these brief letters, the gentle steadiness that defined his character emerged clearly. As autumn unfolded, the 23rd Ohio continued to move through the rugged terrain of Western Virginia, thus participating in a series of operations designed to secure the region for the Union. McKinley's responsibilities expanded alongside the regiment's movements. He learned to navigate supply lines, assist officers in coordinating provisions, and maintain logistical order amid the shifting conditions of field service. The careful habits he had developed in youth, attention to detail, methodical reasoning, and patience, proved invaluable in these tasks. By the end of 1861, McKinley had grown accustomed to the rhythms of military life. Though still young, he had adapted to the long marches, early wake-up calls, and steady responsibilities that defined the daily existence of a soldier. The quiet scholar from Poland had become a dependable presence within the regiment, known not for dramatic gestures but for his unwavering reliability. The war was still in its early phases, and the long path ahead remained shrouded in uncertainty. Yet McKinley moved through these early months with a sense of purpose shaped by the values instilled in him since childhood. The experiences of this period, modest, steady, and formative, laid the groundwork for his gradual rise through the ranks. His devotion to duty, his calm demeanour under pressure, and his ability to approach challenges with thoughtful clarity would soon lead to greater responsibilities. The young private who had entered the war quietly would emerge as a trusted figure within the regiment, preparing him for the deeper trials and growing leadership that awaited in the years to come. As the months of 1862 unfolded, the 23rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry settled into a period of steady engagement, moving through the wooded valleys and narrow passes and winding roads of what was then Western Virginia. The regiment had grown more experienced, its early uncertainty gradually replaced by quiet competence. Among its officers, one figure provided a stabilizing presence: Rutherford B. Hayes, a man whose calm discipline and thoughtful leadership resonated deeply with the young men who served beneath him. For William McKinley, still a private but increasingly trusted, the opportunity to serve under Hayes became one of the defining influences of his early adulthood. Hayes, older and more seasoned, observed the character of those under his command with care. He found in McKinley a young soldier whose diligence and steadiness set him apart, not through ambition or displays of bravado, but through reliability in moments when reliability mattered most. Hayes appreciated these quieter traits. He saw in McKinley someone who approached each duty, however small, with patient attention and understated resolve. Their relationship grew not through dramatic events, but through the slow accumulation of daily interactions, brief conversations during marches, small assignments completed with precision, and the calm, unassuming manner with which McKinley met each new responsibility. Late in 1862, the regiment found itself engaged in the delicate operations typical of the region, holding mountain passes, protecting supply lines, and supporting broader Union movements throughout the area. McKinley's role, still rooted in logistics, expanded steadily. He ensured that rations reached the men on time, assisted in organizing supply wagons. Isan helped coordinate the distribution of provisions during field operations. These tasks required clarity of mind and consistent attention, especially in unfamiliar terrain where a missed delivery or delayed movement could disrupt entire operations. McKinley embraced them with quiet thoroughness. As confidence in him grew, officers assigned him more demanding tasks. He often carried messages between companies, walked long distances in uncertain weather, and supervised small teams responsible for preparing meals or organizing supplies during extended marches. His voice, though soft, carried authority born of sincerity rather than rank. Men responded well to him, sensing that he regarded their needs with thoughtful consideration. A natural rapport developed, grounded in the fairness and respect he showed to all. Through the winter and spring seasons, Hayes continued to take note of McKinley's progress. He appreciated the young private's calm when others grew weary or discouraged. In this period, military life beyond the battlefield contained constant challenges: cold nights under canvas, long marches through rain and mud, and the steady pressure of uncertainty about future engagements. McKinley's manner remained even and composed, offering reassurance to those around him. Hayes would later write of him with admiration, recalling the dependable boy from Ohio who carried out every duty with quiet excellence. In the summer of 1862, McKinley received his first promotion to corporal. The advancement came without ceremony, but it represented a meaningful acknowledgement of his steady service. Soon after, he rose to the rank of sergeant. These promotions signalled growing trust, yet McKinley accepted them with characteristic modesty. He focused not on the markers of a rank, but on the responsibilities that accompanied them, guiding less experienced soldiers, ensuring that orders were carried out smoothly, and maintaining calm structure in the small tasks that sustained daily life. The regiment's movements continued through gently rolling countryside, small farms, and forested ridges. McKinley adapted well to the shifting demands of each location. During rest periods, he read whenever books were available, small volumes borrowed from officers or purchased from itinerant vendors who followed the army. His interest in learning remained alive even amid military duties. Fellow soldiers sometimes gathered near him around campfires, sharing quiet conversations late into the evening. McKinley listened attentively, speaking infrequently but offering remarks of quiet clarity when he did. The calmness of these evenings contrasted with the seriousness of the regiment's work. By 1863, as the war intensified across wider fronts, the 23rd Ohio took part in operations critical to Union control of the region. McKinley's responsibilities deepened accordingly. He managed ration distribution under more demanding conditions, ensuring that men received provisions even when supply routes narrowed or weather-delayed shipments. His ability to maintain order amid logistical strain became increasingly valued. Hayes, recognizing the need for reliable leaders within the regiment, began to involve McKinley more directly in planning and coordination. He relied on him to carry sensitive communications, to oversee small groups during marches, and occasionally to act in supervisory roles when officers were elsewhere engaged. Though still not an officer himself, McKinley performed these duties with the poise of someone who understood the broader significance of each task. One moment in particular deepened Hayes's respect for McKinley. During a difficult operation in late summer, the regiment required urgent reallocation of supplies under threat of enemy movement. McKinley moved quickly and calmly through the camp, organising the distribution of rations and ensuring that each company received what it needed before the column advanced. His composure under pressure impressed not only Hayes, but also the men whose work depended on his efficiency. Though modest, this moment revealed the combination of steady judgment and quiet leadership that would guide McKinley through life. By 1864, Hayes strongly recommended McKinley for an officer's commission. The endorsement reflected not only the trust he had earned through consistent service, but also Hayes's belief in McKinley's natural aptitude for leadership. The recommendation moved through channels slowly, as such matters often did during the war, but Hayes remained firm in his support. In time, McKinley received his commission as a second lieutenant, a milestone reached not through ambition, but through the deliberate unfolding of daily reliability and moral steadiness. Serving under Hayes had shaped McKinley in lasting ways. He had observed a model of leadership grounded in patience, integrity, and a quiet understanding of responsibility. These traits resonated deeply with the foundations of his own character. Their relationship, formed in the unhurried progression of shared service, would endure far beyond the war. Years later, Hayes would reflect warmly on the young soldier who had grown steadily into a capable officer, and McKinley would remember his mentor with deep respect, acknowledging the influence Hayes had on his life's direction. In these years of slow transformation, McKinley moved from an inexperienced private to a young officer shaped by discipline, reflection, and thoughtful service. The war had revealed his capacity not only to endure hardship, but to guide others with a calm, steady hand, qualities that would continue to define him in the long chapters ahead. When the Civil War finally drew to a close in the spring of 1865, William McKinley emerged from 4 years of steady service with a quiet sense of fulfillment and an equally quiet uncertainty about the future. The war had transformed him gradually, elevating him from private to officer, shaping his understanding of responsibility, and deepening his appreciation for the steady virtues of discipline, patience, and moral clarity. Yet as he rode homeward toward Poland, he returned not to celebration, but to a calm landscape, ready to resume its familiar rhythms after years of national upheaval. Ohio's fields, newly green with early summer growth, offered a gentle contrast to the rugged hills and camps he had known. Small towns returned slowly to ordinary life, their residents carrying both the sorrow of loss and the cautious optimism of rebuilding. McKinley, still only in his early 20s, had stepped back into civilian life with the same modest composure that had guided him through the war. He reunited quietly with his family, spending familiar evenings in the home where he had once studied by lamplight. Though welcomed warmly by his community, he avoided the attention that sometimes accompanied returning officers, preferring instead to reflect on the experiences he had carried with him. Like many young men of his generation, McKinley now faced the question of how to shape a future beyond the war. His early interest in law, nurtured gently during his youth, resurfaced with new clarity. The principles he had absorbed during military service, order, duty, thoughtful decision-making, aligned naturally with the discipline required in legal study. With characteristic deliberation, he resolved to pursue this path, and choosing a profession that offered both intellectual challenge and steady service to his community. He began his study of law under the guidance of established attorneys in Warren, immersing himself in casebooks, commentaries, and the measured logic of legal reasoning. McKinley approached this work with the quiet rigour that had marked his academic efforts years earlier at the Poland Seminary. He read carefully, made detailed notes, and reflected deeply on the principles underlying each case. Those who observed him during this period remarked on his calm concentration, his respect for the steady progression of study, and his preference for thorough understanding over hurried mastery. Life as a law student in post-war Ohio unfolded at a gentle pace. McKinley lived modestly, often boarding with local families or sharing simple lodging with fellow students. His days began early and ended late, filled with hours spent reading, copying legal forms, and attending to the small clerical tasks that accompanied apprenticeship in a 19th century law office. Yet even amid these quiet labours, McKinley showed a growing interest in public affairs. He followed debates about Reconstruction, the reintegration of southern states, and the expanding responsibilities of a nation recovering from conflict. Though he expressed his views sparingly, he understood that the country was entering a period in which steady leadership would be essential. In 1867, after completing the necessary examinations, McKinley was admitted to the Ohio bar. He established a law practice in Warren, working with a partner and gradually earning the trust of clients who valued his thoughtful manner and integrity. His courtroom style matched his personality, measured, respectful, and grounded in careful preparation. He did not rely on sweeping oratory or dramatic gestures. Instead, he presented arguments with quiet clarity, appealing to reason rather than emotion. Judges noted his fairness, and clients appreciated his steady approach. As McKinley built his practice, he also deepened his involvement in community life. He joined local organizations, attended civic meetings, and offered legal guidance to those in need. His neighbors saw in him a young man devoted not only to his profession, but to the broader well-being of the town. Though still early in his career, he had begun to show the qualities that would later define his public service: reliability, modest leadership, and a sincere desire to contribute to the common good. McKinley's return to civilian life also brought with it the emergence of personal hopes and relationships. During this period, he met Ida Saxton, a young woman from a respected Canton family. Their early acquaintance unfolded gently, through conversations, shared gatherings, and moments of quiet understanding. Ida, known for her intelligence and refined character, found in McKinley a man of unusual steadiness. He admired her thoughtfulness, and together they formed a connection that would deepen in the coming years. Though their courtship would not fully mature until the early 1870s, its beginnings reflected the same calm harmony that marked every stage of McKinley's life. In 1869, drawn by new opportunities, McKinley moved his law practice to Canton. The town, larger and more commercially active than Warren, offered a wider field for professional growth. McKinley settled into Canton with quiet purpose, establishing an office near the courthouse and gradually developing relationships within the community. His reputation for fairness and careful reasoning spread steadily, and he soon became known as one of the town's promising young attorneys. Canton also exposed McKinley to a broader circle of public affairs. Discussions about state and national politics flowed through the town with increasing frequency, and local leaders often sought his perspective on legal and civic matters. Though he remained focused on building his practice, McKinley listened attentively to these discussions, yet his interest in public service began to deepen, not through ambition, but through the same sense of quiet responsibility that had guided him during the war. By the early 1870s, the path of McKinley's life had become clearer. He had established himself as a respected lawyer, formed meaningful connections within his community, and begun to consider the possibility of serving in public office. These developments unfolded gradually, shaped by reflection rather than haste. His transition from soldier to attorney and eventually toward civic leadership, reflected the gentle continuity of a character shaped by calm perseverance. McKinley's post-war years were not marked by dramatic events or rapid transformation. Instead, they formed a period of steady rebuilding, of purpose, profession, and personal life. The experiences of the Civil War remained with him, offering lessons in resilience, cooperation, and the quiet strength that emerges from shared duty. As he settled into civilian life, these lessons blended seamlessly with the values he had carried since childhood, preparing him for the gradual rise that lay ahead. As William McKinley's law practice took firmer shape in Canton during the early 1870s, his personal life entered a new and deeply significant chapter. Among the individuals he came to know during these years was Ida Saxton, a young woman whose thoughtful disposition and gentle refinement matched the calm steadiness of his own character. Their acquaintance developed gradually, shaped not by sudden emotion but by the quiet unfolding of shared understanding. Through their conversations and the unhurried rhythms of social gatherings, McKinley came to appreciate her intelligence, her cultural interests, and the composure with which she navigated the social world of Canton. Ida belonged to a well-established family whose presence was woven deeply into the fabric of the town. Her father, a respected banker, had encouraged in her a sense of curiosity and confidence, unusual for young women of the time. Ida received an education that emphasized languages, literature, and an appreciation for the wider world. She traveled, observed new environments with thoughtful attention, and returned home with a broadened perspective. Yet she carried herself with modesty, preferring quiet reflection to the outward display of accomplishment. McKinley, who valued sincerity above grand gestures, might have found her company both calming and enriching. Their early talks revealed a shared respect for duty, family, and the simple virtues that shape a meaningful life. Ida admired McKinley's gentle seriousness, the reliability that had guided him through the war, and the patient earnestness he brought to his work as an attorney. For his part, McKinley felt drawn to her quiet strength, an inner steadiness that would soon play a defining role in their marriage. Their courtship unfolded with measured steps. They met at community events, walked together through the familiar streets of Canton, and exchanged letters marked by warmth and sincerity. McKinley approached the relationship with the same deliberation he brought to every aspect of his life. He valued not haste, but the gradual formation of trust and mutual respect. Ida responded with equal gentleness, sensing in him a partner whose devotion would remain steady regardless of circumstance. In January of 1871, William and Ida were married in a modest ceremony, attended by family and close friends. The day carried a tone of calm joy rather than extravagance. Those present noted the composed happiness of the couple, a harmony that reflected their shared values and the quiet depth of their connection. Their first home together in Canton became a place of soft routines and mutual support. McKinley's law practice occupied many of his hours, yet he always returned with gratitude to the peace that Ida created within their household. The early years of their marriage brought moments of both hope and sorrow. Their first daughter Catherine was born in 1871, followed by a second daughter in 1873. These children brought warmth to the home, filling its rooms with the gentle sounds of infancy. McKinley, who treasured family deeply, found great joy in these early days of fatherhood. He balanced professional responsibilities with evenings spent beside the cradle, reading softly or watching the girls with quiet affection. Yet the family soon faced profound loss. Their second daughter died in infancy, a sorrow that settled heavily upon Ida. The death of their first daughter a few years later deepened her grief, and her health began to decline in ways that would shape the remainder of her life. she developed a nervous condition marked by episodes of anxiety and physical weakness. These challenges were difficult, yet McKinley met them with unwavering gentleness. Those who knew him recalled how he adjusted every aspect of his daily life to provide comfort and reassurance to his wife. He organised his schedule around her needs, ensured she received attentive care, and cultivated a home environment marked by calm routine. Their marriage, strengthened through shared sorrow, came to be recognised as one of deep devotion. McKinley developed the habit of sitting beside Ida during social gatherings, ready to offer his arm or a quiet word of reassurance whenever she grew anxious. Even during the height of his political life, he maintained this practice, never failing to rest his hand upon hers during state dinners or public receptions, offering her a steady anchor amid unfamiliar surroundings. Outside the home, McKinley's public responsibilities expanded. His reputation as a fair and diligent attorney drew increasing attention from civic leaders. He began speaking at local gatherings, participating in community affairs, and offering thoughtful commentary on issues affecting Ohio and the nation. Yet throughout this growing public engagement, his first loyalty remained to Ida. Their home life was the centre of his world, a place where he found rest, perspective, and the quiet strength necessary for the responsibilities that lay ahead. As the 1870s progressed, McKinley's interest in public service deepened. The combination of his wartime experience, legal knowledge, and calm communication style made him a natural voice in local political circles. Neighbours and colleagues encouraged him to consider running for office. McKinley did not approach this lightly. He reflected on the demands such a path would place on Ida and on their household. Only when he felt confident that he could pursue public responsibilities without compromising his devotion to her did he begin taking the first careful steps toward political life. Ida, despite her fragile health, supported his growing involvement. She admired his sense of duty and recognized the sincerity that guided his decisions. Her quiet presence remained a constant source of strength, grounding him through the deliberations that would soon lead him into the world of national politics. Their marriage, defined by mutual care, provided a stable foundation from which McKinley would begin the next chapter of his life. Through these years, McKinley learned to balance public service with private devotion, an equilibrium that would characterize his entire political career. The rhythms of home life with Ida shaped the calm, considerate manner he brought to every public task. Her needs reminded him of the importance of patience, gentleness, and attention to the smallest details, qualities that would become hallmarks of his leadership as he moved cautiously toward the responsibilities awaiting him. By the mid-1870s, William McKinley had become a familiar figure in Canton, known both for his calm presence in the courtroom and for the steady devotion he showed within his home. His reputation for fairness, measured speech, and thoughtful judgment made him a natural choice for community members seeking guidance on civic matters. It was in this atmosphere of gentle public expectation that McKinley first stepped toward political life, not with ambition or urgency, but with the same deliberation that shaped all aspects of his character. Political gatherings in Ohio during this era often took place in modest meeting halls or beneath open pavilions in town squares. McKinley began attending these events quietly at first, listening to local concerns about taxation, veterans' benefits, and the shifting economic landscape of the post-war years. When he did speak, he did so with composed clarity, grounding his remarks in first-hand experience and practical reasoning. Residents appreciated his sincerity. He offered neither sharp rhetoric nor sweeping promises, but rather a measured understanding of the issues that affected their daily lives. The Republican Party in Ohio, recognizing his potential, gradually invited McKinley into more formal roles. His wartime service gave him natural rapport with veterans, and his legal background equipped him to address questions of policy and governance. He was soon asked to participate in party committees assist in drafting statements, and speak on behalf of local candidates. McKinley accepted these responsibilities with humility. He viewed political involvement not as a pursuit of personal advancement, but as a continuation of the service he had begun years earlier on the fields of the Civil War. In 1876, McKinley's calm diligence led to his nomination for Stark County prosecuting attorney. This role demanded both legal skill and public trust, as the prosecutor was responsible for representing the county in criminal cases and ensuring that justice was pursued with balance and fairness. McKinley campaigned gently, speaking to small groups of voters in a tone that conveyed respect rather than persuasion. He emphasized the importance of careful review, impartial judgment, and the steady application of law. His approach resonated with citizens who valued integrity above spectacle, and he was elected to the position with quiet confidence. Serving as prosecuting attorney brought new responsibilities but few changes to his personal demeanor. McKinley approached each case with patience, examining evidence thoroughly and ensuring that every proceeding unfolded with order and dignity. His conduct in the courtroom reinforced his reputation as a man guided by conscience rather than contention. Even when dealing with difficult cases, he maintained an even tone, speaking firmly when necessary but always with restraint. Colleagues noted that he treated all parties, victims, defendants, and jurors, with equal respect. Throughout these years, Ida remained a central figure in his life. Her health, still fragile, required attention and care, and McKinley adapted his routines accordingly. He structured his work so that he could spend evenings at home, offering her companionship and support. Their household, though touched by sorrow, remained a place of calm atmosphere and gentle routine. Visitors often commented on the quiet harmony between husband and wife, observing how McKinley's presence offered Ida reassurance and stability. As his term as prosecutor drew to a close, McKinley found himself increasingly drawn into discussions about national policy. The country faced complex questions of currency, tariffs, veterans' pensions, and the long-term effects of rapid industrial growth. McKinley, whose wartime service had instilled in him a strong sense of national unity, felt a growing responsibility to contribute to these broader conversations. He studied reports, followed congressional debates, and spoke occasionally at public gatherings where his thoughtful tone stood out amid more forceful orators. Encouraged by community leaders and supported by Ida, McKinley agreed to run for Congress in 1876. His decision emerged not from personal aspiration, but from steady reflection on how he might best serve the public. The campaign unfolded in a calm, methodical manner. McKinley travelled throughout the district, meeting residents on porches, in workshops, and at small gatherings in schoolhouses. He listened to their concerns with genuine attentiveness. His speeches remained characteristically measured, focusing on practical solutions and the principles he believed essential to good governance: fairness, fiscal responsibility, and support for those who had served in the nation's armed forces. His opponent ran a more assertive campaign, but McKinley maintained his steady course. He walked from town to town, shook hands with farmers and factory workers, and spoke gently about the importance of unity and careful legislation. His modest style resonated across the district, and when the votes were counted, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, beginning what would become a long period of public service at the national level. The transition from Canton to Washington, D.C. unfolded with little fanfare. McKinley approached his new responsibilities with the same thoughtful preparation he had applied to his legal studies years earlier. Before departing, he spent evenings reviewing government documents, studying the organization of congressional committees, and reflecting on the ways in which he might best represent the people who had placed their trust in him. Ida supported him with quiet pride, though her health limited her ability to travel frequently. Their correspondence during these early congressional years revealed the tenderness of their partnership. McKinley wrote often, describing his work in calm detail, and Ida responded with gentle encouragement. When McKinley took his seat in the House of Representatives, he arrived not as a figure of commanding presence, but as a young legislator prepared to learn. The atmosphere of the Capitol, its long corridors, its rooms lined with records, its slow unfolding of debate, suited him well. He listened more than he spoke, studied the methods of experienced members, and observed the patterns that guided the legislative process. His colleagues soon noticed the quiet seriousness with which he approached his duties. He joined committees, reviewed bills, and gradually began contributing to discussions with his characteristic clarity. These early years in Washington shaped McKinley's understanding of national governance. He learned to navigate the complexities of federal policy, to interpret the needs of his district within the broader context of national priorities, and to apply the calm persistence that had guided him since youth. Though still near the beginning of his political life, he already demonstrated the qualities that would later define him as a leader: patience, thoroughness, modest confidence, and a steady devotion to public service. When William McKinley took his seat in the U.S. House of Representatives in March of 1877, he entered a world marked by slow deliberation, layered procedures, and the patient rhythms of legislative life. The Capitol, with its broad corridors and quiet reading rooms, offered a setting well suited to his temperament. McKinley arrived not as a loud or forceful presence, but as a young representative prepared to learn the intricate work of governance. He listened attentively during debates, observed the methods of seasoned lawmakers, and studied the structure of committees with the same calm discipline that had guided his legal training. His earliest months in Washington were spent in steady observation. McKinley rose each morning with unhurried purpose, walking from his modest lodgings to the Capitol while reviewing notes he had prepared the night before. He occupied his seat in the House chamber with quiet readiness, attentive to the pace of debate and the subtle dynamics that shape decision-making. Colleagues quickly noted his reliability. He attended every session, read every document set before him, and approached each task, however minor, with respectful seriousness. McKinley soon developed a particular interest in economic and industrial matters, especially tariffs. The issue touched nearly every corner of national life during the late 19th century. For a country expanding rapidly through industry, railroads, mining, and manufacturing, tariff policy shaped the balance between domestic growth and foreign competition. McKinley approached the subject not with ideological fervour, but with careful study. He read extensively, consulted with business leaders from Ohio, and spoke with workers who described the challenges of competing with imported goods. Over time, he developed the belief that protective tariffs could help stabilize American industries and provide secure employment for working families. This gradual deepening of expertise earned McKinley a place on the Ways and Means Committee, the powerful body responsible for shaping tax and tariff legislation. Appointment to the committee was a significant step for a young representative, yet McKinley accepted it with characteristic modesty. He devoted long hours to reviewing revenue reports, studying comparative tables, and examining the details of existing tariff laws. His colleagues often found him in committee rooms after others had departed, quietly marking passages in documents or drafting notes in his steady handwriting. As he grew more confident in his understanding of economic policy, McKinley began contributing more frequently to debates on the House floor. His speeches were calm, structured, and rooted in careful reasoning. He avoided grand flourishes, presenting instead a clear progression of ideas supported by factual detail. Members of both parties recognized the sincerity behind his words. Though disagreements on tariff policy could be sharp, McKinley maintained a tone of respect that allowed him to engage constructively with opponents. While his expertise in tariffs gradually elevated his national profile, McKinley never lost sight of the day-to-day responsibilities of representing his district. He returned often to Canton, walking familiar streets and speaking with the people who'd elected him. He attended small gatherings in schoolhouses, visited local factories, and met privately with veterans whose concerns remained close to his heart. These interactions shaped his legislative priorities. McKinley believed deeply that a representative must remain rooted in the needs of his constituents, and he maintained this grounding throughout his congressional career. Ida, though unable to accompany him to Washington regularly due to her fragile health, remained a constant source of strength. Their correspondence carried the same tenderness that had shaped their marriage from its beginning. McKinley wrote to her often, describing committee work, debates, and daily routines. Ida, in turn, offered gentle encouragement. Their letters formed a steady thread of continuity between home and the capital, reminding McKinley of the quiet domestic world to which he always returned. Throughout the late 1870s and early 1880s, the House of Representatives faced numerous challenges, including debates over civil service reform, veterans' pensions, and the nation's currency. McKinley approached each subject with deliberate care. He believed that legislation should arise from patient study rather than haste. And he often urged colleagues to consider long-term consequences rather than temporary pressures. His methodical style earned him respect across party lines, even among those who disagreed with his conclusions. By the mid-1880s, McKinley had become one of the leading voices on tariff policy. His speeches increasingly drew attention from newspapers across the country, yet he maintained an unassuming manner in both public and private settings. When recognized for his work, he responded with quiet gratitude, always crediting the committees and colleagues with whom he served. This humility became a hallmark of his public life. The 1880s also brought shifts in the broader political landscape. Industrial expansion created new economic tensions, and debates over labor rights, monetary policy, and federal authority grew more complex. McKinley navigated these changes with measured adaptability. He consulted experts, studied new developments, and continued to refine his positions through thoughtful inquiry. His ability to integrate evolving knowledge with steady principles made him a reassuring presence during a time of national transition. Despite growing responsibilities, McKinley remained grounded. He walked daily for exercise, preferring quiet streets near the capital in the early morning. He read voraciously, works on economics, history, and philosophy, believing that public service required continuous learning. And whenever possible, he returned to Canton to be by Ida's side, sitting with her in the soft light of their parlour, offering gentle companionship during her more difficult days. By the close of this period in his life, McKinley had earned recognition not as a fiery orator or political tactician, but as a thoughtful legislator whose influence rested on patience, fairness, and sincere dedication. His ascent within the House had been gradual, shaped by years of careful work rather than moments of sudden prominence. Yet this quiet method, consistent with his character, positioned him increasingly as a national figure, one whose steady manner would guide him into the next chapters of leadership. By the late 1880s, William McKinley had become one of the principal voices in Congress on matters of national revenue and tariff policy. His reputation for careful analysis and steady leadership earned him the chairmanship of the House Ways and Means Committee, a position that carried significant responsibility. The country stood at an important juncture. Industries were expanding, trade patterns were shifting, and workers across the nation looked to federal policy for stability. McKinley approached these challenges with the same deliberate attention that had marked all his years in public office, studying economic reports, correspondence from manufacturers, and testimonies from labourers with equal seriousness. As chairman, he undertook the task of drafting a comprehensive tariff bill, one intended to provide strong protection for American industries. The measure that emerged became known as the McKinley Tariff, a wide-ranging piece of legislation designed to raise duties on imported goods in hopes of strengthening domestic production. McKinley believed deeply in the principle underlying the bill that a young industrial nation required the shelter of robust tariffs to ensure secure employment and fair wages for its citizens. This conviction had formed slowly over many years of observation, conversation, and study. Throughout the drafting process, McKinley remained calm and methodical. He listened to representatives from a wide range of industries, reviewed long tables of comparative prices, and consulted economic data with quiet diligence. His office in the Washington, D.C. often filled with stacks of documents, reports on iron production, agricultural yields, textile imports, and shipping records, each of which he examined with careful concentration. Colleagues sometimes found him working late into the night, making meticulous adjustments to the bill as new information came to light. Debate over the tariff grew intense. Critics argued that the bill would raise consumer prices, while supporters insisted it would secure American jobs. Through it all, McKinley maintained his steady manner. When he rose to speak in the House chamber, he presented his arguments without haste or sharpness. His speeches reflected his characteristic blend of clarity and composure, explaining complex economic principles in measured tones. Even those who disagreed with him acknowledged the sincerity with which he pursued what he believed to be the nation's best interests. When the McKinley Tariff passed in 1890, it represented one of the most far-reaching economic measures of its time. It increased duties on a broad range of imported goods, as well also placing certain essential items, such as sugar, on the free list. The bill embodied McKinley's belief that thoughtful tariff policy could balance national growth with consumer need. He regarded its passage not as a personal triumph, but as the culmination of years of steady work grounded in principle. Yet the political consequences of the tariff unfolded in ways that McKinley approached with quiet acceptance. Public reaction across the country shifted as consumers perceived rising prices, and some industries struggled with the adjustments required by the new policy. These developments did not discourage McKinley personally, but they shaped the next chapter of his career. In the 1890 congressional elections, he faced a difficult contest in his district. Despite his long service and the respect he commanded, he was narrowly defeated, a result influenced heavily by the public's mixed response to the new tariff law. McKinley accepted the outcome with calm dignity. He spoke little about personal disappointment and did not attribute blame to others. Instead, he expressed gratitude to his constituents for the years he had been honoured to serve them. His quiet composure during this period revealed the depth of character that had guided him throughout his public life. He returned home to Canton, where Ida welcomed him with her usual gentle affection. Together they resumed the quiet routines of domestic life, finding comfort in familiar surroundings. Back in Canton, McKinley returned to his legal practice, greeting the transition without impatience. He approached his work with renewed focus, meeting with clients, reviewing cases, and maintaining the steady flow of daily responsibilities. Yet even during this period away from elected office, he remained connected to public affairs. Community members continued to seek his guidance, inviting him to speak at gatherings and local events. His calm voice and thoughtful reasoning still resonated deeply with residents who valued his integrity. In 1891, the people of Ohio once again looked to McKinley for leadership. Encouraged by friends, supporters, and civic leaders, he agreed to run for governor, a role that offered the opportunity to address the state's economic and social needs directly. Unlike the turbulent national environment of Congress, the governorship promised a more practical administrative form of service. McKinley embraced the challenge with characteristic steadiness, focusing his campaign on unity, or opportunity, and the principles of fair governance. The campaign unfolded at a gentle pace, shaped by McKinley's preference for calm dialogue rather than heated debate. He travelled through towns and rural communities, speaking with citizens about employment, education, and the gradual modernization of the state's industries. His speeches reflected his years of experience in Congress, but they also carried a personal warmth suited to Ohio's local gatherings. People found comfort in his sincerity and in the familiar steadiness of his presence. McKinley won the election and assumed the governorship with a composed sense of purpose. Though this chapter belongs to later sections of his story, his emergence as governor marked a natural continuation of the path shaped by the tariff's aftermath. The McKinley tariff, while politically costly, had reinforced his commitment to principled service and prepared him for new responsibilities at the state level. In these years, McKinley's public life illustrated a gentle truth, that leadership is not defined solely by success or defeat, but by the steadiness with which one meets both. The tariff's passage, the electoral loss that followed, and the calm transition into the next chapter of service reflected the deep resilience of his character. He had weathered shifting political winds with dignity, grounded always in the values formed in his youth. When William McKinley assumed the governorship of Ohio in January 1892, he entered a role that required both administrative precision and a calm, unifying presence. Unlike the national stage of Congress, where debates often unfolded across broad ideological lines, the governorship placed McKinley closer to the day-to-day concerns of citizens, schools, infrastructure, employment, public safety, and the quiet but essential functions of state government. It was a position well suited to his temperament. He approached it not with fanfare, but with steady discipline, and a quiet belief in the value of thoughtful, incremental progress. The Ohio State House, with its modest, orderly chambers and sunlit hallways, became the setting for McKinley's daily work. Each morning, he reviewed reports from state departments with the same careful attention he had once applied to legal briefs and congressional documents. He read slowly, making notes in his meticulous handwriting, and sought clarity before making decisions. His staff admired his patience. He never appeared rushed, even when facing urgent matters. Instead, he allowed each issue to unfold in a deliberate sequence, confident that clarity would emerge through calm discussion and steady reflection. One of the central challenges of McKinley's governorship involved the economic uncertainty of the early 1890s. Industrial expansion had brought prosperity to many, yet it also exposed workers to fluctuations in wages and employment. McKinley responded with a balanced approach, seeking to protect workers while maintaining a climate favourable to industry. He met frequently with labour representatives, listening to their concerns with genuine attentiveness. He also conferred with business leaders, encouraging fair practices and steady employment wherever possible. His aim was not to impose sweeping reforms, but to foster cooperation between labour and industry, an approach reflective of his belief that steady dialogue could resolve even the most persistent tensions. Education formed another core focus of his administration. McKinley believed that the strength of a state rested upon the steady cultivation of its citizens' minds. He supported measures to improve school facilities, strengthen teacher training, and provide more consistent funding to rural districts. He spoke often about the value of learning, echoing the influences of the Poland Seminary and the quiet encouragement of his mother. These efforts, though gradual, helped set the foundation for more equitable and organised public schooling across Ohio. McKinley also worked to modernise aspects of state infrastructure. Roads, canals, and public buildings required attention as Ohio's population continued to grow. He approached these matters with the same orderly sensibility that guided his broader administrative duties, prioritizing projects according to need and available resources. He emphasized long-term planning rather than short-term display, believing that improvements undertaken with patience would better serve the people of the state. Throughout his governorship, McKinley maintained a tone of measured optimism. During public addresses, he spoke in calm, reassuring phrases, emphasizing unity, dignity, and the promise of steady progress. Citizens responded warmly to his approach. Unlike some leaders who relied on impassioned appeals, McKinley's speeches created a sense of quiet confidence. Listeners felt that he understood their concerns and that he governed with sincere devotion to the well-being of the state. Ida remained a constant consideration during this period. Her health fluctuated, requiring gentle attention and predictable routines. McKinley frequently travelled between Columbus and Canton, ensuring that he could spend as much time with her as possible. The journey, though long, became part of his weekly rhythm. He left the State House with calm resolve, travelled home to provide companionship and comfort, and returned to Columbus refreshed by the familiar quiet of their household. His devotion to her, known widely throughout Ohio, contributed to the public's affection for him. Despite the demands of the governorship, McKinley maintained his characteristic habits of study and reflection. He read widely, economic essays, historical accounts, and philosophical works, believing that a leader must continually strengthen the mind. He often carried books with him on trains between Columbus and Canton, taking notes in the margins or marking passages for later consideration. These habits sustained him during the long, calm evenings that followed days of administrative duties. McKinley's leadership style remained consistent, gentle, thorough, and grounded in humility. He held regular meetings with department heads, encouraging open communication and mutual respect. He invited members of both major political parties to offer input on legislation and administrative matters. His inclusive approach created an atmosphere of cooperation, helping the state navigate difficult issues without the intensity of partisan conflict. The Panic of 1893, a severe national economic downturn, occurred during McKinley's second term. Though Ohio could not remain untouched by the widespread financial distress, McKinley responded with composed clarity. He focused on maintaining public services, supporting relief efforts, and encouraging economic stability through prudent fiscal management. His calm leadership provided reassurance to citizens facing uncertainty. He explained the situation in measured tones, avoided blame, and emphasized that steady perseverance would guide the state through hardship. As McKinley neared the end of his second term, he had become one of the most respected governors in Ohio's history. His administration was marked by integrity, thoughtful governance, and a manner of leadership that valued patience over haste. Visitors to the State House often remarked on the quiet atmosphere surrounding his office, a reflection of the man himself. The respect he earned during these years would soon extend beyond Ohio, positioning him as a figure of growing national attention. By the time he stepped down as governor in January 1896, McKinley had established himself as a leader whose calm presence invited trust. His governorship had not been marked by dramatic reforms or sweeping transformations. Instead, it unfolded through the steady, gentle movements of daily administration. Decisions made with care, problems approached with humility, and policies shaped through thoughtful dialogue. This consistency left a deep impression on citizens and colleagues alike. As McKinley returned once more to Canton, he did so as a man whose public life had reached a new stage of readiness. The experiences of these years had refined his leadership, prepared him for broader responsibilities, and deepened the quiet qualities that had been present since youth. He would soon enter the national conversation not merely as a congressman or governor, but as a leading candidate for the presidency, carrying forward the steady, sincere approach that had guided him thus far. When William McKinley concluded his service as governor in early 1896, the nation stood at a moment of profound economic unease. The Panic of 1893 had unsettled the financial stability of millions, and conversations across the country reflected widespread anxiety over currency, employment, and the uncertain path ahead. In this environment, many Americans began looking for a leader whose demeanour could steady public confidence. McKinley, whose calm approach had defined both his congressional and gubernatorial service, quietly emerged as a figure capable of offering reassurance during unsettled times. His home in Canton soon became the centre of national attention. The community, once accustomed to the gentle rhythms of small-town life, now found itself host to visitors from every part of the country. Delegations arrived by train, local streets filled with respectful crowds, and McKinley's front porch, an ordinary wooden structure shaded by familiar trees, became the stage for what would come to be known as the Front Porch Campaign. McKinley did not design this approach as a strategy of spectacle, rather, or it grew naturally from his quiet temperament and his desire to remain close to Ida, whose health continued to require his steady presence. Instead of travelling broadly, he welcomed citizens to Canton, greeting them with composed warmth. Visitors approached the house by the hundreds, sometimes by the thousands, gathering on the lawn to hear him speak. The setting created an atmosphere of calm sincerity. Children sat near the front, adults stood quietly behind them, and McKinley addressed each group with steady, measured language, expressing gratitude for their visit, acknowledging their concerns, and sharing his vision for national renewal. The central issue of the 1896 election was the question of currency, whether the country should continue using gold as the basis for its monetary system or adopt a policy of free silver, which many believed would expand the money supply and ease economic hardship. The debate stirred deep emotions, especially among farmers and workers who had suffered during the Depression. McKinley approached the subject with characteristic care. He believed that maintaining the gold standard would bring stability, protect wages, and restore national confidence. Yet his arguments were not confrontational. He spoke slowly, offering explanations grounded in patient reasoning rather than political fervour. Across the country, his opponent, William Jennings Bryan, presented a dramatic contrast. Bryan travelled extensively, delivering impassioned speeches that stirred audiences with emotional force. His famous Cross of Gold speech brought him national recognition, capturing the frustrations of many Americans. Yet McKinley remained composed. He did not match Bryan's passion with passion of his own. Instead, he trusted that thoughtful clarity would reach citizens seeking reassurance rather than excitement. Within the McKinley home, Ida continued to be a quiet, steady presence. Though unable to participate in public events, she followed the campaign closely from the parlour, where she could hear crowds gathering on the lawn. William, attentive to her needs, paused often throughout each day to sit with her. These moments of domestic calm shaped the atmosphere of the entire campaign. Visitors sensed the harmony of the household, and McKinley's speeches often reflected the balance he maintained between public responsibility and private devotion. Throughout the spring and summer of 1896, delegations arrived from all corners of the country, miners from the west, and factory workers from the Midwest, shopkeepers from the east, and veterans who felt a special bond with McKinley because of his service in the Civil War. Each group brought its concerns, and McKinley addressed them with steadiness. He spoke of the importance of fair wages, stable currency, and the gradual restoration of prosperity through disciplined governance. He offered neither radical proposals nor harsh criticism of opponents, but instead emphasized the value of unity, and the promise of steady, patient progress. Newspapers covered the campaign extensively. Reporters noted McKinley's quiet composure, his clear communication, and the unusual intimacy of the front porch setting. Photographs captured scenes of visitors arranged neatly on the lawn, their hats removed in respect, yet listening to McKinley's calm voice as he spoke from the wooden steps of his home. These images circulated widely, creating a sense of familiarity that resonated with citizens across the nation. Many felt that they knew McKinley personally, even if they had never travelled to Canton. Behind the scenes, McKinley's longtime friend and advisor Mark Hanna managed the broader structure of the campaign, coordinating correspondence, fundraising, and printed materials. But McKinley himself remained focused on the substance of communication, what he wished to convey and the tone he believed the country needed. He reviewed drafts of speeches carefully, revising passages to reflect his belief in moderation and unity. His handwriting appeared on countless pages, shaping the gentle cadence of his public message. As autumn approached, the election drew nearer. The country, still uneasy after years of financial strain, listened attentively to both candidates. McKinley continued his steady schedule, greeting visitors, offering thoughtful remarks, and maintaining the quiet dignity that defined his life. Supporters admired not only his proposed policies, but the calm presence he projected in a moment of national tension. When the votes were counted on November 3rd, 1896, William McKinley had been elected President of the United States. The result reflected broad support across industrial states, communities seeking stability, and citizens drawn to his composed leadership. In Canton, the news was received with quiet pride. Neighbours gathered near the McKinley residence, observing the soft glow of lamplight from the windows and imagining the quiet conversations unfolding inside. McKinley, though grateful, responded with the humility that had shaped his entire career. He thanked supporters, expressed confidence in the country's future, and prepared himself for the responsibilities that awaited him. The transition from private citizen to president-elect unfolded in the same gentle rhythm as the campaign itself. McKinley continued to spend time with Ida, ensuring that her comfort remained central to their daily life. He organised his papers carefully, met with advisers in unhurried discussions, and began shaping the outlines of an administration that would reflect his values: patience, clarity, and a steady devotion to public service. The Front Porch Campaign of 1896 became, in memory, one of the most distinctive presidential campaigns in American history, remarkable not for spectacle, but for its calm sincerity. It reflected McKinley himself, a man who believed that leadership required steadiness, dignity, and a quiet respect for the concerns of ordinary citizens. In this period, the country found in him a reassuring guide, one whose commitment to unity and deliberate governance offered hope in a time of uncertainty. And as McKinley prepared to leave Canton for Washington, he did so carrying the same calm determination that had shaped his journey from the beginning. When William McKinley arrived in Washington, D.C. in March of 1897 to assume the presidency, he did so with the calm steadiness that had marked every stage of his public life. The inauguration unfolded beneath a soft early spring sky, and witnessed by citizens who sensed in him a reassuring presence. His address, measured and thoughtful, avoided the stirring heights sometimes associated with new administrations. Instead, McKinley spoke with gentle clarity about the importance of economic stability, national unity, and gradual renewal after years of financial strain. These themes would shape the tone of his early presidency, guiding his attention to domestic priorities that required patience, deliberation, and steady guidance. The first months in office were defined by the slow, careful formation of a cabinet. McKinley approached this responsibility with characteristic attention, selecting individuals known for competence and balance. He met with prospective appointees in quiet rooms of the White House, listening attentively as they discussed policy and administrative philosophy. He valued order, clarity, and mutual respect, qualities that fostered a collaborative atmosphere within his administration. Once the cabinet was complete, McKinley expressed quiet confidence that they would approach their duties with diligence rather than ambition. The White House itself became a place of gentle routine. McKinley began each day early, reading reports in the soft morning light that filtered through tall windows. His desk filled gradually with correspondence from business owners, labor leaders, farmers, and everyday citizens expressing their hopes and concerns. He read as many letters as possible, making careful notes in the margins. He believed that the presidency required not only broad direction, but an understanding of individual voices, and each carrying a quiet story of its own. One of McKinley's foremost domestic concerns was the restoration of economic stability. The Panic of 1893 had left deep marks across the nation, and communities continued to struggle with unemployment, reduced wages, and uncertain markets. McKinley approached the situation not with sweeping declarations, but with a steady belief in gradual recovery supported by sound policy. He encouraged measures designed to restore confidence in currency, strengthen national credit, and promote investment. Though the broader debate over monetary standards persisted, McKinley's calm guidance gradually reassured financial markets, helping the nation begin to move towards stability. Tariff policy also remained central to his early administration. Drawing upon his long experience in Congress, McKinley supported new tariff legislation intended to balance government revenue with protection for American industries. He viewed this not as a rigid ideological commitment, but as a practical tool for securing employment and fostering growth. As deliberations unfolded in Congress, McKinley followed them closely, offering gentle encouragement to lawmakers and expressing trust in the legislative process. When the new tariff law was passed in 1897, he signed it with a sense of measured accomplishment, recognizing it as one step among many in the nation's economic recovery. Agriculture, too, received thoughtful attention. Farmers from across the country had endured years of hardship, and McKinley listened carefully to their concerns. He sought ways to improve access to credit, stabilize commodity prices, and support the long-term health of rural communities. He avoided making sweeping promises, instead emphasizing steady, achievable progress. Through these efforts, he hoped to ease the burdens that had weighed heavily on families whose livelihoods depended on the land. Throughout these early months, McKinley maintained close connection with Ida McKinley, whose delicate health shaped many aspects of their life in the White House. He arranged his schedule so that he could spend time with her throughout the day, offering her companionship and reassurance as she adjusted to the new environment. Their private quarters were arranged with comfort in mind, filled with soft furnishings and gentle light to create a sense of calm. Visitors often remarked on the tenderness with which the president cared for her, a devotion that seemed to steady him as much as it comforted her. McKinley's relationship with the press also reflected his composed manner. Reporters visited the White House regularly, receiving updates delivered without haste or flourish. McKinley believed in transparency, but he also valued the dignity of the office. He offered information thoughtfully, avoiding unnecessary commentary. Journalists came to respect his quiet candor, noting that even in moments of political tension, he remained measured and courteous. Public receptions at the White House adopted the same tone. McKinley greeted guests warmly but without ostentation, speaking to each person with gentle attentiveness. The receptions unfolded at an unhurried pace, shaped by his preference for sincere conversation rather than display. These gatherings, often illuminated by the glow of gaslight and accompanied by the soft notes of a military band, reflected the calm atmosphere he cultivated throughout his administration. Education and research received renewed attention during these years. McKinley believed that national progress depended not only on economic recovery, but on the steady development of knowledge. He supported institutions devoted to scientific study, agricultural innovation, and industrial research. His administration encouraged cooperation between universities and government agencies, fostering an environment in which new ideas could take root through gradual experimentation rather than sudden upheaval. Labour relations, though often difficult nationwide, were approached with characteristic moderation. McKinley sought dialogue with both workers and employers, advocating mutual understanding and fair negotiation. He did not offer radical solutions, nor did he ignore the complexities facing the industrial workforce. Instead, he emphasized the importance of stability, dignity, and balanced opportunity. He believed that steady employment formed the foundation of national well-being, and he aimed to support conditions in which workers could pursue their livelihoods with confidence. As months passed, the atmosphere surrounding McKinley's presidency remained one of composed progress. His decisions were shaped by careful study and his language by calm conviction. Even when issues required firmness, he expressed his reasoning with respect and restraint. The nation, still emerging from years of uncertainty, found comfort in his steady hand. Yet beneath the tranquility of domestic policy, the world beyond American borders began to shift. International events stirred slowly into view, creating questions the nation would soon be compelled to address. For the moment, however, McKinley remained focused on the needs of the home front, guiding the country with quiet purpose as it regained its economic footing and renewed its confidence. In these early years of his presidency, the gentle rhythm of McKinley's leadership set a tone of stability that many Americans welcomed. His focus on domestic issues, economy, labour, agriculture, education, and administrative integrity reflected his enduring belief that a nation's strength grows first from within. Through calm decision-making and thoughtful attention, he helped the country move forward, one steady step at a time. As William McKinley's presidency moved through its early period, the calm focus he maintained on domestic renewal gradually met the unfolding reality of a world in transition. The late 19th century was a time when nations across the globe reconsidered their roles, their economies, and their connections beyond their borders. Steamships crossed oceans with greater speed. Telegraphs carried messages between continents in minutes rather than weeks, and trade routes intertwined more tightly than ever before. The United States, long focused on its internal growth, found itself increasingly attentive to events abroad. McKinley, with his steady temperament and preference for quiet deliberation, approached these developments with the same measured care that shaped his domestic policy. During this time, American business interests expanded beyond familiar markets. Manufacturers, farmers, and exporters sought new opportunities as the nation's productive capacity grew. Quietly, through letters and reports reaching the Washington, D.C. offices, McKinley observed how American goods entered distant ports, how tariffs abroad shaped trade patterns, and how global events influenced economic stability at home. He understood that while the United States remained strong within its own borders, the future would require steady engagement with the broader world. One of McKinley's earliest foreign policy concerns involved developments in Cuba, where a long struggle for independence continued against Spanish rule. Reports arriving in Washington described the hardships experienced by civilians, the destruction of land and homes, and the gradual strain placed on international relationships. McKinley read these accounts with quiet seriousness, recognizing both the humanitarian concerns and the delicate diplomatic responsibilities of the United States. He resisted calls for immediate intervention, believing that patient diplomacy offered the best chance for peaceful resolution. His correspondence during these months reflected a desire to encourage stability through negotiation rather than confrontation. At the same time, McKinley sought to strengthen economic ties through reciprocal trade agreements. He believed that cooperation with other nations could support American prosperity while fostering mutual respect. His administration worked carefully with diplomats to explore agreements with countries in the Caribbean, South America, and the Pacific. These efforts unfolded slowly, shakstiya, shaped by the rhythms of negotiation and the measured exchange of proposals. McKinley approached each discussion with the calm conviction that international cooperation must rest on fairness and clear understanding. Throughout these developments, McKinley maintained a reserved and thoughtful manner in dealing with foreign ambassadors. Meetings in the White House occurred without haste, often in rooms softened by afternoon light filtering through tall windows. He listened carefully to each envoy, acknowledging their perspectives with respect. He avoided heightened rhetoric, preferring quiet explanation grounded in principle. Several diplomats later remarked on the gentleness of his tone and the sincerity with which he addressed even the most delicate issues. Events in Hawaii also drew McKinley's attention during this period. Following political changes that had unfolded before his presidency, the islands sought closer ties with the United States. The prospect of annexation raised questions of governance, economic stability, and the responsibilities the nation might assume beyond its traditional boundaries. McKinley approached the issue with deliberate reflection. He reviewed reports from commissioners, studied the wishes of residents and businesses, and considered the long-term implications for both the islands and the United States. His preference remained for decisions grounded in careful consultation, rather than swift assertion of power. While these international concerns grew gradually, they did not overshadow McKinley's ongoing focus on peace. He held a sincere belief that nations should resolve differences through patient diplomacy whenever possible. His approach reflected both personal conviction and the broader temperament of the country, which still remembered the hardships of the Civil War and preferred a path of careful engagement abroad. McKinley spoke often about the value of maintaining friendly relations with all nations, emphasizing that strength must be accompanied by restraint. In these years, the President relied greatly on his Secretary of State, with whom he maintained a close and steady working relationship. Their discussions unfolded in long, quiet meetings in the Executive Mansion, where maps, reports, and diplomatic cables were reviewed at an unhurried pace. McKinley encouraged careful analysis rather than quick conclusions, fostering an atmosphere in which each decision was shaped by reflection and mutual understanding. Even as foreign policy questions grew more prominent, McKinley remained attentive to the rhythms of the White House and the needs of Ida, whose health required ongoing care. He returned to their private quarters throughout the day, offering gentle reassurance and taking comfort in the quiet moments they shared. These pauses provided balance, reminding him of the personal foundations that supported his public responsibilities. International events did not move with uniform speed. Some issues evolved slowly across months, while others shifted with sudden reports carried by telegraph. McKinley managed these changing rhythms with composed steadiness. He held firm to the belief that the United States should act as a responsible member of the global community, guided by principles rather than haste. Whether considering trade, diplomacy, or the welfare of distant populations, he preserved the calm, deliberate manner that had shaped his life from youth. As 1897 and 1898 progressed, the world's attention increasingly turned to developments in Cuba and the broader Caribbean. Though those events would lead to new challenges for the United States, shaping decisions that would soon require more decisive action, McKinley's early approach grounded his presidency in a spirit of caution, patience, and thoughtful engagement. Through these formative years of his administration, a picture emerged of a leader navigating an expanding international landscape with quiet assurance. The world was changing, and the United States was changing with it. Yet McKinley moved through these shifts without alarm, and guided by a gentle conviction that careful stewardship could bring both stability and progress. As the year 1898 opened, President William McKinley continued to approach the unrest in Cuba with patience and restraint. For several years, reports had reached the United States describing the hardships endured by civilians during the island's struggle for independence from Spain. These accounts contained descriptions of disrupted farms, displaced families, and the strained conditions that accompanied prolonged conflict. McKinley read each dispatch with quiet concern, recognizing the humanitarian dimension of the crisis, while also understanding the delicate nature of international involvement. Public feeling in the United States, however, gradually intensified. Newspapers carried vivid descriptions of suffering, and American merchants worried about disrupted trade. There were also concerns about the safety of US citizens living or working near the conflict. Still, McKinley resisted taking hasty action. He believed deeply in diplomacy and continued to encourage negotiations aimed at easing the situation in Cuba, urging Spanish officials to consider reforms that might lead to peaceful resolution. The turning point arrived in February 1898, when the USS Maine, stationed in Havana Harbor, was destroyed by a sudden explosion. The loss of life was severe, and the event stirred profound sorrow across the United States. For many Americans, the tragedy deepened existing concerns, and calls for intervention increased. McKinley responded with his characteristic steadiness. Though deeply affected by the loss, he insisted on a careful investigation before any conclusions were drawn, hoping to avoid a rush toward conflict. For weeks, he continued exploring diplomatic channels. Letters and telegrams passed quietly between Washington and Madrid, seeking a path that might preserve peace while addressing humanitarian needs. McKinley worked long hours in the White House, meeting with advisors, reviewing reports, and considering every possible means of avoiding war. His preference remained clear. If a peaceful outcome could be achieved with dignity and fairness, it should be pursued. Despite these efforts, the situation gradually moved beyond diplomatic resolution. Conditions in Cuba remained difficult. Public pressure in the United States grew stronger, and Spain's responses failed to create the stability McKinley sought. By April, then, it was evident that peace could no longer be maintained through negotiation alone. With calm deliberation and a heavy heart, McKinley asked Congress for authorization to intervene. Even in this request, his tone remained measured. He emphasized the need to relieve suffering, protect American interests, and restore order with as little violence as possible. Once war began, it unfolded swiftly. The conflict, remembered for its brevity, involved coordinated operations in both the Caribbean and the Pacific. McKinley followed developments closely from the White House, receiving reports from military leaders and naval commanders. Yet even during wartime, he sought to maintain a spirit of moderation. He issued instructions emphasizing humane treatment of prisoners and the importance of limiting unnecessary destruction. His aim was not conquest, but resolution of a situation that had grown untenable. In the Pacific, American naval forces engaged Spanish ships near Manila, achieving a decisive victory that drew international attention. McKinley read the reports quietly, aware of the broader implications for the region. Though the United States had not originally intended to assume long-term responsibilities in the Pacific, the changing conditions prompted thoughtful consideration of how best to support stability in the aftermath of conflict. In the Caribbean, forces moved toward Cuba and Puerto Rico, coordinating efforts with Cuban insurgents who had long sought independence. McKinley's guidance to military leaders emphasized cooperation, respect, and careful planning. He understood that the United States carried the responsibility of conducting itself with restraint, and even in moments of military engagement. The White House remained a quiet center of communication, where McKinley read reports in the early hours of morning and drafted instructions in the calm of evening. Throughout the conflict, Ida remained close to him. She sensed the weight these decisions placed upon him, and her presence provided comfort during the long days and nights when news arrived slowly by telegraph. In quiet moments within the private quarters of the executive mansion, the two shared gentle conversations reflecting on the hope that the war would end soon and that peace could be restored. By the summer of 1898, the conflict had reached its conclusion. Spain agreed to negotiations and an armistice was declared. McKinley approached the moment not with celebration but with solemn gratitude. He expressed appreciation for the service of American troops and sorrow for the lives lost on both sides. He hoped that the conclusion of hostilities would allow Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines to move towards stability in ways consistent with their needs and aspirations. The Treaty of Paris, signed later that year, formally ended the war and established new responsibilities for the United States. Cuba was placed on a path toward independence, while Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines came under American administration. These developments created new questions: how to govern distant territories, how to support local populations, and how to uphold principles of fairness and dignity across vast distances. McKinley approached these challenges as he had approached the war itself, with deliberation, care, and a sincere wish to act in the best interests of all involved. The Spanish-American War, though brief, marked a turning point in American history. For McKinley, it represented a moment in which his preference for peace met the reality of unavoidable conflict. Yet even in war, his steady character remained evident. He sought to minimize suffering, uphold humane standards, and pursue resolution with dignity. He understood that leadership required not only the ability to act when necessary, but the patience to hold back until every peaceful avenue had been explored. As the nation transitioned from conflict to peace, McKinley continued to guide the process with quiet purpose. He recognized that the responsibilities assumed in the war's aftermath would shape the future of the United States in ways not yet fully understood. With characteristic calm, he prepared to navigate these responsibilities, seeking always the steady path between principle and practical governance. When the Spanish-American War came to a close in 1898, President William McKinley found himself overseeing a nation stepping gently into a new historical moment. The conflict had been brief, yet its consequences extended far beyond the battlefield. The United States, which had long defined its growth primarily within its own borders, now held responsibilities across distant territories. McKinley approached this shifting landscape with the same steady composure that had guided him through every stage of his life. He understood that the tasks ahead required patience, thoughtful administration, and a calm respect for the people whose futures would be shaped by these decisions. And Cuba stood foremost among these responsibilities. Though the island had endured years of hardship under Spanish rule, McKinley insisted that the United States had no wish to impose permanent control. Instead, he envisioned a transition marked by gradual stabilization and preparation for self-governance. Reports arriving daily from Havana described the condition of public institutions, the needs of families returning to their homes, and the progress of rebuilding efforts. McKinley read each dispatch with careful attention. He encouraged military and civilian authorities to work collaboratively, ensuring that relief efforts reached communities in a manner that preserved dignity and fostered trust. To Puerto Rico, which had come under American administration as a result of the conflict, McKinley extended similar care. And the island's needs differed from Cuba's, shaped by unique landscapes, cultural traditions, and local governance. Still, McKinley believed that American stewardship must be guided by fairness and respect. He supported the establishment of civil institutions that would promote stability, education, and public health. Whenever he spoke of these responsibilities, his tone remained gentle, emphasizing cooperation rather than dominance. The aim, he said quietly in meetings with advisors, was to help the island maintain order and steady development. The Philippines presented the most complex challenge. The archipelago, far across the Pacific, approached the end of Spanish rule with aspirations of independence. Yet the transition unfolded amid uncertainty, local divisions, and competing expectations. McKinley approached the question with deep reflection. In the evenings, within the quiet of the White House, he reviewed reports detailing the social and political landscape of the islands. Advisors offered differing recommendations, some urging immediate withdrawal, others calling for extended oversight. McKinley listened to each perspective with patient respect, seeking a path that balanced American responsibility with local welfare. His eventual decision to establish a temporary American administration emerged not from ambition, but from a belief that abrupt departure might result in disorder or foreign intervention. He hoped that careful guidance would allow the islands to develop institutions capable of supporting long-term stability. This approach unfolded gradually, shaped by ongoing communication with military leaders, his civil administrators, and observers familiar with local conditions. Though the path ahead remained uncertain, McKinley's tone never shifted from one of thoughtful restraint. At home, the country experienced a gentle rise in confidence. Economic recovery continued, supported by renewed industry, expanding trade, and steady employment. McKinley followed these developments with quiet satisfaction. He believed that the nation's internal strength enabled it to fulfill its external responsibilities with dignity. Still, he reminded his cabinet that prosperity should not encourage haste. Each decision, whether domestic or international, must be made with clarity and purpose, shaped by consideration for all who would feel its effects. Throughout these years, the White House maintained a calm atmosphere reflecting McKinley's temperament. Advisors met with him in rooms softened by afternoon light. Discussions unfolded gradually, with long pauses for thought and reflection. Even when decisions carried significant weight, McKinley avoided raising his voice or speaking with urgency. Those who served under him often remark that he provided a sense of balance during moments when others might feel compelled toward haste. Ida remained a central presence. Though her health fluctuated, she accompanied her husband during important occasions, bringing with her the quiet grace that had marked their life together. McKinley arranged his schedule around her needs, ensuring that she never felt overwhelmed by the responsibilities of public life. In the evenings, after meetings had concluded, he returned to their private quarters, years where he read aloud from books they both enjoyed, or simply sat with her in companionable silence. These moments of calm reflection sustained him through the long demands of the presidency. Foreign diplomats visiting the United States during this period often remarked on McKinley's gentle confidence. He welcomed them with courtesy, offering thoughtful remarks on international developments without overstating American intentions. He believed that diplomacy required respect and that nations must listen to one another with sincerity. Whether discussing trade, humanitarian concerns, or the political transitions underway in new territories, McKinley's language remained measured and grounded in principle. Meanwhile, conversations within the United States reflected a mixture of curiosity and contemplation. Citizens followed news from Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines with increasing interest. Newspapers published detailed accounts of Reconstruction efforts, debates within Congress, and the gradual development of civil institutions abroad. McKinley allowed these discussions to unfold naturally, acknowledging the importance of public engagement. Yet he maintained that the nation must proceed with patience. The responsibilities now before the United States were new, and their long-term implications required steady consideration. Through 1899 and into 1900, McKinley oversaw this expanding array of responsibilities with unwavering calm. He recognized that history rarely revealed clear guidance in moments of transition. Instead, leadership demanded thoughtful attention to the immediate needs of people, the gradual shaping of institutions, and the quiet dedication to principles that allowed progress to unfold one careful step at a time. By the end of his first term, the nation had begun to view McKinley not only as a domestic stabilizer, but also as a steady guide in an interconnected world. His gentle approach had shaped America's early steps on a global stage, offering reassurance during a moment of expanded responsibilities. Yet, he remained, at his core, the same man who once walked the quiet streets of Canton, guided by sincerity, deliberation, and a belief that lasting progress arises from measured decision rather than haste. The responsibilities assumed after the Spanish-American War continued to evolve, shaping the course of McKinley's second term and defining one of the most transformative periods in American history. But through it all, his demeanor never changed. He remained the calm, thoughtful presence at the center of a nation moving steadily into a new century. As the year 1900 approached, William McKinley found himself guiding a nation that had travelled through a period of challenge, adjustment, and gradual renewal. The economy had strengthened after years of uncertainty. New responsibilities abroad were being organised with steady care, and the country felt itself entering a new century with cautious confidence. Against this backdrop, citizens across the United States began quietly considering whether McKinley should continue in the office he had approached with such calm deliberation. The question of re-election rose naturally, shaped not by dramatic calls for leadership, but by a gentle sense that continuity might serve the nation well during a time of transition. McKinley did not seek the presidency with eagerness in 1900 any more than he had in 1896. His temperament remained unchanged, measured, thoughtful, and grounded in a sincere desire to serve. Yet he recognized that responsibilities undertaken during his first term required ongoing attention. Domestic prosperity had begun to take firmer shape, but the policies that supported it demanded continued stewardship. The administrative tasks following the Spanish-American War were still unfolding, and the country's expanding role in the world required balanced decision-making. For these reasons, McKinley accepted the prospect of a second term with quiet resolve. The atmosphere surrounding the 1900 campaign differed from the intensity of 1896. 4 years earlier, the country had faced economic hardship that stirred passionate debate over currency and employment. Now, the national mood carried a softer tone of stability. Factories were active, farms saw improved conditions, and communities began to rebuild confidence in their daily lives. McKinley understood that the campaign should reflect this calmer environment. He preferred to focus on reassurance rather than urgency, emphasizing the value of steady leadership rather than grand promises. Once again, McKinley's home played an important role. Though he could not devote as much time to front porch gatherings as he had during the earlier campaign, visits from delegations continued, reflecting a familiar rhythm. Workers, veterans, educators, Yes, and civic groups arrived quietly in Canton, walking the gentle incline of the street toward the McKinley residence. They gathered on the lawn beneath broad branches that shaded the house during warm summer months. McKinley stepped onto the porch with his characteristic composure, greeting each group with the same warmth and sincerity he had shown years before. His speeches remained thoughtful and unhurried. He spoke of the nation's progress with gratitude, emphasized the importance of maintaining stability, and acknowledged the responsibilities the United States had assumed in distant territories. His tone was never celebratory. Instead, it conveyed a sense of steady guardianship, a belief that the work begun must continue with patience and respect for all involved. He avoided sharply partisan language, preferring instead to speak of shared national aims, prosperity, peace, and responsible conduct on the world stage. Beyond the familiar scenes in Canton, the broader campaign unfolded across the country. Figures supporting McKinley travelled widely, meeting voters and explaining the administration's policies with energy. One of the most notable supporters was his running mate, Theodore Roosevelt, whose lively presence offered a clear contrast to McKinley's quieter style. Roosevelt spoke energetically across the nation, often to large, enthusiastic crowds. His vigour complemented McKinley's calm steadiness, creating a balanced partnership that appealed to citizens who welcomed both stability and forward movement. McKinley observed Roosevelt's travels with quiet appreciation. He understood that their differing temperaments served different purposes. His own presence offered reassurance rooted in consistency, while Roosevelt's vigour engaged audiences with a sense of active national pride. Together, their efforts formed a gentle but effective rhythm that carried the campaign forward. Within the White House, McKinley continued to focus on his presidential responsibilities. He reviewed reports, held steady meetings with advisers, and kept a careful eye on developments abroad. The needs of Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines remained significant, and McKinley believed deeply that ongoing attention, not campaign activity, must guide his daily work. As a result, his public appearances were limited and all was undertaken with mindful consideration for Ida, whose health continued to require care and a calm environment. Ida remained at the centre of his life during this period. The rigours of campaign season never altered his devotion to her well-being. When not meeting visitors or attending to presidential responsibilities, he remained by her side, offering companionship through quiet routines that had sustained them for decades. Their hours together in the White House, often spent in gentle conversation or in the simple comfort of shared silence, shaped McKinley's sense of balance and purpose. Newspapers across the country covered the campaign steadily. They wrote about the improved economy, the administration's handling of international affairs, and the partnership between McKinley and Roosevelt. Editorials often highlighted McKinley's calm demeanour, noting the confidence that citizens seemed to derive from his thoughtful approach. The nation watched the campaign unfold without the intense anxieties that had characterized 1896. Instead, there was a sense of gradual momentum, a belief that continuity would ensure the steady path the country had begun. Election day arrived in early November. Communities across the nation gathered quietly at polling places, church basements, schoolhouses, and local halls, casting ballots that reflected their hopes for the century now beginning. The process unfolded peacefully, shaped by the stability McKinley had helped nurture. As returns came in, it became clear that he had won re-election by a comfortable margin. Citizens greeted the outcome with calm satisfaction rather than exuberant celebration, reflecting the tone of the campaign itself. When McKinley learned the results, he responded as he always did, with gratitude, humility, and quiet reflection. He expressed appreciation to the citizens who'd entrusted him with another term and offered renewed commitment to guiding the nation with patience and sincerity. There was no triumphal tone, only a steady acknowledgement of the responsibilities ahead. The days that followed were marked by unhurried preparation for the next phase of his presidency. McKinley continued to work closely with his cabinet, planned long-term administrative goals, and devoted time to Ida's comfort and health. In these routines, familiar and grounding, he found the quiet strength necessary for another period of service. The 1900 election revealed much about McKinley's character and the nation's regard for him. It showed that his calm presence offered reassurance during shifting times, and that his preference for deliberate, unrespectful leadership resonated deeply with citizens seeking stability. As he prepared to continue his work into the unfolding years of the new century, McKinley remained, at his heart, the same steady figure who had guided the country through challenge with gentle, thoughtful resolve. In the spring and summer of 1901, the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo captured the imagination of visitors from across the Western Hemisphere. Conceived as a grand showcase of progress, industry, and cooperation among the nations of the Americas, the exposition offered a vision of possibility at the dawn of a new century. Its broad avenues, illuminated by electric light, displayed advancements in technology, transportation, and agriculture. Visitors moved slowly along shaded paths, marveling at inventions, listening to quiet demonstrations, and observing cultural exhibits from distant lands. The atmosphere was gentle and inviting, shaped by a sense of shared optimism. For President William McKinley, the exposition embodied many of the ideals he valued: peaceful cooperation, economic growth, and the steady exchange of knowledge across borders. He had followed its planning with interest, reading reports from organizers and speaking with advisors about the significance of the event. As the exposition neared completion, he expressed a quiet hope that it might strengthen ties between nations, offering an example of harmony at a time when the world was becoming more interconnected. Though the responsibilities of office kept him in Washington, D.C. for much of the summer, McKinley looked forward to visiting Buffalo in early September. Ida's health remained a consideration, yet arrangements were made to ensure her comfort during the journey. McKinley insisted upon her well-being as a priority, planning the trip with characteristic care, selecting gentle routes, preparing restful accommodations, and ensuring moments of quiet throughout the schedule. He believed that the exposition would offer not only a public occasion, but also a setting in which she might enjoy the calm beauty of the gardens and exhibits. As their train approached Buffalo, McKinley viewed the soft outlines of the exposition grounds with quiet appreciation. The tall electric tower, the curved colonnades, and the luminous fountains created a serene landscape, especially in the gentle light of late afternoon. The air was filled with the murmured conversations of visitors and the distant sound of orchestral music drifting from open pavilions. Though much attention awaited him, McKinley remained composed, ready to meet the public with the same steady graciousness he had shown throughout his presidency. The president's arrival was marked by respectful enthusiasm. Crowds gathered along the walkways, waving small flags and greeting him with warm applause. McKinley acknowledged them with a gentle nod, taking time to smile at children, speak quietly with veterans, and offer a few words to families who had waited patiently to see him. Despite the size of the gathering, the atmosphere remained calm, shaped by the dignity he projected. During his visit, McKinley toured several exhibits, pausing often to speak with inventors, artists, and representatives from other nations. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed his thoughtful curiosity. The displays of new machinery impressed him not for their grandeur, but for their potential to improve everyday life. Agricultural innovations, electric devices, and transportation models each held his attention. He reflected aloud on the ways in which peaceful cooperation could strengthen mutual prosperity across the Americas. One of the central moments of McKinley's visit was his address at the exposition. Standing before an audience seated beneath bright decorative banners, he spoke with quiet conviction about the importance of trade and unity. His voice, calm and measured, carried across the crowd. He emphasized the value of peaceful exchanges between nations, noting that economic ties created not only prosperity but understanding. He spoke of a world entering a new century, and of the responsibility all nations shared to pursue harmony rather than conflict. Those who listened later described the speech as gentle in tone, steady in its message, and reflective of McKinley's enduring belief in cooperation. After the speech, McKinley moved through the exposition grounds more informally. Visitors approached him in small groups, expressing appreciation for his leadership. He shook hands with hundreds of people, workers, travellers, families, officials, greeting each person with sincere attention. His schedule remained full, yet he never rushed. He paused often to rest with Ida in shaded areas where gentle breezes carried the faint scent of flowers. She remained at his side for portions of the visit, supported by his quiet presence and the thoughtful arrangements made for her comfort. Throughout the visit, McKinley seemed to find moments of peaceful reflection. In the evening, the exposition grounds glowed with thousands of electric lights, creating a soft radiance that illuminated walkways and fountains. The president observed the scene with calm wonder. He understood that such displays symbolized more than technological achievement. They represented the steady progress of nations working side by side, sharing knowledge, and building toward a future shaped by cooperation rather than division. Yet even amid the tranquil scenes of the exposition, McKinley remained mindful of the responsibilities awaiting him in Washington. He reviewed documents with advisers in the quiet hours of early morning, maintaining contact with cabinet members and ensuring continuity in government affairs. The balance between public engagement and thoughtful governance had always shaped his actions, and the visit to Buffalo was no exception. The Pan American Exposition offered a glimpse into the world as McKinley hoped it might become: peaceful, orderly, and guided by mutual respect. The president's calm presence reflected this vision. He attended receptions, toured exhibits, and met with dignitaries, but always at a pace that conveyed moderation and sincerity. Observers remarked that he seemed to embody the very ideals celebrated by the exposition: steadiness, dignity, and a belief in the quiet work of progress. As the visit drew toward its later moments, McKinley prepared to meet the public once more. A reception was arranged at the Temple of Music, a grand building known for its ornate design and excellent acoustics. The event was intended as a simple gesture of accessibility, a chance for citizens to greet their president and exchange brief moments of goodwill. McKinley accepted the engagement willingly, viewing it as an opportunity to thank those who had gathered throughout the exposition. He expressed to aides that such gestures were essential to public service, grounding leadership in personal connection. The day remained warm yet comfortable, with sunlight filtering gently through the trees surrounding the exposition grounds. Visitors walked slowly toward the Temple of Music, unaware that the quiet harmony of the moment would soon shift. For McKinley, however, the day remained simply another opportunity to meet those he served, an extension of the calm, thoughtful devotion that had defined his presidency. In these final peaceful scenes at the Pan American Exposition, McKinley's character shone with unmistakable clarity. He moved through the grounds with dignity, found moments of rest beside Ida, and carried himself with the quiet assurance of a leader who believed deeply in the steady promise of the new century. On the afternoon of September 6, 1901, President William McKinley walked toward the Temple of Music at the Pan American Exposition with the same serene composure he had displayed throughout his visit. The building, adorned with graceful arches and crowned with soft hues of decorative design, welcomed a steady stream of visitors drawn to the chance of greeting the president in person. The day had unfolded peacefully. The air was warm but cooling gently, and sunlight filtered through trees lining the pathways. McKinley remarked quietly to aides that it was a fine day for meeting the public, an opportunity he valued deeply, believing that leadership rested not only in policy, but in the personal reassurance offered through simple gestures of acknowledgement. Inside the Temple of Music, an orderly line of citizens waited with patience, moving slowly toward the president. The atmosphere remained calm, filled with the murmured expressions of gratitude and soft footsteps on polished floors. McKinley stood before them unhurried, offering each visitor a warm smile and a gentle handshake. He listened to brief words of appreciation, nodded kindly to children brought forward by parents, and exchanged respectful greetings with working men and women who had travelled to the exposition for this moment. As the line continued its steady pace, as an individual approached whose intentions were concealed behind an ordinary appearance. When he reached McKinley, he extended his hand as others had done. Moments later, 2 shots rang out, breaking the stillness that had surrounded the room. The president stepped back slightly, his expression calm even amid the sudden shock. Those nearby rushed to his side, guiding him toward a chair as physicians hurried forward. Despite the pain he felt, McKinley urged restraint toward the assailant, asking that no harm come to him. His first instinct remained one of compassion, a reflection of the gentleness that had shaped his life. Attending doctors examined the wound with quiet urgency. McKinley, though gravely injured, maintained a composed demeanour, speaking softly and reassuring those around him. He was transported carefully to a nearby residence on the exposition grounds, where a room had been prepared for his immediate care. Curtains were drawn, allowing filtered light to settle gently across the space. Medical personnel worked with deliberate attention, offering what treatment was available. Ida, informed of the event, was brought to the room with great care to spare her distress. When she arrived, McKinley greeted her with tender calm, asking that she be reassured and comforted. For a time, early reports seemed cautiously hopeful. The president showed signs of strength, and his physicians expressed optimism that he might recover. Messages from across the nation arrived in Buffalo, filled with sorrow, concern, and quiet prayers for his healing. Citizens gathered outside in the warm evening light, maintaining a respectful vigil. Within the house, McKinley rested intermittently, speaking gently to attendants and often expressing gratitude for their care. But as the days unfolded, complications emerged. Despite the hopeful tone of initial assessments, signs of internal infection began to appear, an ever-present danger at a time before advances in surgical treatment and antiseptic practice. McKinley's physicians observed these symptoms with increasing concern, though they continued to monitor him closely and provide comfort. The president, sensing the gravity of his condition, remained composed. He spoke little, conserving his strength, but when he did speak, his words were gentle, shaped by gratitude and quiet resignation. On the evening of September 13th, the president's health declined sharply. Physicians gathered in the room, moving with solemn calm, his sister recognizing that the end approached. Ida was brought to him, accompanied and supported tenderly, for she remained the centre of his thoughts. McKinley expressed reassurance to her in soft tones, seeking to ease her fear. Those present later recalled the peacefulness of his manner, even in these final moments. Through the night, McKinley drifted between consciousness and quiet rest. Outside, the crowds continued their vigil, standing in silence beneath the soft glow of lanterns. Messages of sympathy arrived from every part of the country and from abroad, carried by telegraph operators who worked steadily into the early hours. Within the house, the atmosphere remained reverent and still. In the early morning of September 14th, 1901, William McKinley passed away gently, surrounded by those who had cared for him. His final hours reflected the same calm spirit that had guided him throughout his life, marked by kindness, steady courage, and an abiding concern for others. The room fell into quiet after his passing, the soft light of dawn filtering through the windows as if to mark the end of a long and gentle chapter. News of his death spread slowly across the nation. Communities paused in reverent silence. Flags were lowered, church bells tolled, and ordinary citizens gathered in small groups, sharing their grief in hushed voices. Newspapers printed respectful tributes, noting his character, his devotion to Ida, and the calm dignity with which he had led the nation. Across the world, leaders sent messages of condolence, reflecting the international regard McKinley had earned through his measured approach to diplomacy and governance. The path of national mourning unfolded with unhurried solemnity. His body was brought back to the White House, where it lay in state beneath the soft arches of the East Room. Citizens from Washington, D.C. and beyond passed quietly by, some carrying flowers, others pausing briefly to bow their heads. Later his remains were transported to Ohio, where familiar landscapes welcomed him home. Canton received him with profound respect. The streets fell silent as residents lined the route, offering a final tribute to the man whose presence had shaped their community. Ida bore her grief with the same quiet strength that had guided her throughout their life together. Surrounded by family and comforted by the gentle rhythms of familiar routines, she carried forward the memory of her husband with unwavering devotion. In the years that followed, she spent many quiet hours reflecting on their shared life, a life marked not by dramatic events, but by steady loyalty and shared purpose. McKinley's passing marked the close of an era defined by measured leadership and the soft radiance of a man whose public service was shaped by modesty and quiet conviction. His final days reflected the essence of his character. Even at the edge of life, he offered peace rather than fear, compassion rather than anger, and steady courage rather than despair. His memory lingered gently in the hearts of those who knew him, and in the nation he had guided with deliberate and thoughtful care. In the days that followed William McKinley's passing on September 14th, 1901, a profound stillness settled across the United States. The country, only just stepping into a new century, paused in collective reflection, as citizens felt not only the sorrow of losing a president, but the softer ache that accompanies the absence of a familiar and reassuring presence. For many, McKinley had embodied steadiness during uncertain years, guiding the nation with a temperament that soothed rather than stirred. His death, sudden in its arrival and gentle in its final moments, created a quiet void felt from large cities to the smallest towns. In Buffalo, where the president had spent his final days, residents moved in subdued tones. Shops lowered their awnings, schools suspended lessons, and citizens gathered softly in public squares, sharing their grief in whispered conversations. The house where McKinley had been cared for was enveloped in respectful silence. People visited its perimeter not to satisfy curiosity, but to honour the place where his calm spirit had taken leave. Within the home, furnishings remained arranged as they had been during his final hours, the light falling gently across the stillness of rooms once filled with hushed footsteps and low voices of vigilance. The journey back to Washington, D.C. unfolded with deliberate care. McKinley's coffin, draped in the American flag, travelled by train across the eastern landscape. Along the tracks, citizens gathered quietly as the procession passed, on station platforms, beside farm fences, and at the edges of small towns. Many stood in solemn silence, some holding candles, others bowing their heads as the train glided by. The motion, steady and unhurried, felt fitting for a man whose life had been defined by gentleness and composure. In Washington, preparations for the lying in state carried the tone of reverent simplicity. Government clerks, military aides, and household staff moved in soft coordination, arranging the East Room of the White House in muted tones. Heavy curtains softened the light, and floral tributes from across the world filled the air with a faint, steady fragrance. When the doors were opened, a long line of mourners began to flow quietly through the room. Some were prominent officials, but many were ordinary citizens, workers, families, veterans, each approaching the bier with slow steps, their expressions reflecting gratitude for the President's calm service. The viewing continued late into the night. The room remained serene throughout, the soft echo of footsteps marking the passage of each person, offering a final farewell. McKinley had always believed in the power of simple gestures, and in these private moments of farewell, the nation returned to him the same gentle dignity he had shown them in life. After the ceremonies in Washington, preparations began for the journey to Ohio. Canton, McKinley's lifelong home, awaited him with the tenderness of a community that had known him not only as president, but as neighbor, friend, and steady presence. When the train arrived, the town fell into a respectful silence. Local residents lined the route from the station to the church, standing quietly in clothing pressed with care, their hats held softly against their chests. The funeral service in Canton carried an atmosphere of intimate sorrow. Inside the sanctuary, familiar to McKinley and Ida from years of worship, ministers spoke in calm tones about his life of duty, faith, and compassion. Hymns filled the air gently, rising and falling with unforced rhythm. Ida sat surrounded by family and close companions. Though frail, she remained composed, taking comfort in the presence of those who understood the depth of her bond with her husband. Throughout the service, the soft light filtering through stained glass cast muted colours across the pews, creating an atmosphere of peaceful reflection. Following the service, a final procession formed, slow, steady, and touched by the quiet respect of thousands who had gathered. The route carried McKinley past familiar streets where he had once walked in earlier decades, long before public life had drawn him into national service. It passed homes shaded by trees he had known since youth, and the courthouse where he had practiced law. These gentle scenes framed his homecoming in a tone of natural continuity, as if the town itself wished to ease the passage from public memory into peaceful rest. His remains were placed temporarily in West Lawn Cemetery, where a simple structure sheltered the tomb. Plans soon began for a permanent memorial, reflecting the nation's wish to honour his quiet leadership. When the McKinley National Memorial was later completed, its broad steps, calm symmetry, and gentle rise toward the sky expressed a sense of stillness appropriate to his memory. Visitors who approached the memorial in years to come often remarked on its peaceful presence, much like the man it honoured. In the months following his death, national reflection continued in a quiet, unhurried manner. Newspapers published commemorative editions recounting the steady course of his life, his years in Congress, his service as governor, his thoughtful presidency, and the calm way he faced both triumph and adversity. Writers observed that McKinley's leadership style had been understated but deeply effective. He governed not by force of personality, but through patience, sincerity, and an abiding belief in the dignity of public service. His successor, Theodore Roosevelt, spoke often of the gentle strength McKinley possessed. Though Roosevelt's temperament differed greatly from his predecessors, he expressed sincere admiration for the calm discipline with which McKinley had guided the nation. Cabinet members, advisers, and diplomats echoed these sentiments, recalling meetings where his quiet voice shaped decisions through reason rather than insistence. many later noted that McKinley's presence had a grounding effect, bringing steadiness to discussions that might otherwise have turned toward haste. For Ida, the years after her husband's passing unfolded with a subdued, fragile rhythm. Supported by family members and long-standing companions, she continued to live in Canton, surrounded by memories of their life together. She visited the memorial whenever her health allowed, sometimes sitting for long periods in quiet contemplation. Though sorrow never left her entirely, she found comfort in the gentle routines of home, in the companionship of those who cared for her, and in the enduring memory of a marriage marked by unwavering devotion. As the nation advanced through the early years of the 20th century, McKinley's legacy settled into the historical consciousness with the same soft cadence that had surrounded his life. Historians observe that his presidency had marked a transition, a bridge between an older era of American governance and the emerging complexities of a new century. Under his calm direction, the United States had strengthened economically, assumed international responsibilities with careful deliberation, and begun defining its place in a rapidly changing world. Yet beyond policy and political development, it was his character, gentle, patient, and steady, that lingered most clearly in public memory. Citizens who had once stood on his front porch, or listened to his quiet speeches, or simply observed the respectful way he carried himself, remembered a leader who offered reassurance rather than intensity. His manner remained a touchstone for those who valued integrity and modesty in public life. In the soft afterglow of national mourning, William McKinley's life appeared not as a series of dramatic moments, but as a continuous thread of calm dedication. He served with a quiet steadiness that shaped every decision, every gesture, and every relationship. And though the nation moved forward, his memory continued to rest gently within it, an enduring reminder that leadership at its best may speak in calm and steady tones. In the years following William McKinley's death, the United States moved steadily into the 20th century, shaped by forces of industrial expansion, scientific advancement, and evolving international presence. And yet woven into this forward movement was the enduring influence of a president whose calm manner, measured decisions, and steady devotion to public service left a quiet but unmistakable mark on the nation. McKinley's legacy did not announce itself in dramatic proclamations or sweeping transformations. Instead, it emerged gradually, much like the man himself, soft in tone, deliberate in nature, and lasting in its effect. Historians reflecting on his presidency often began with the economic conditions he inherited upon taking office in 1897. The nation had recently endured a severe depression, leaving communities anxious and uncertain. McKinley's approach, grounded in patience and practical understanding, helped guide the country toward renewed stability. His belief in balanced tariff policy, steady monetary standards, yet cooperative engagement with business and labour contributed to an atmosphere in which industry revived and confidence returned. In later decades, economists noted that this period formed a foundation for the sustained growth that defined much of the early 20th century. Beyond economic matters, McKinley's influence reached into the realm of American diplomacy. The United States, previously cautious in its international posture, found itself stepping gently into a broader role on the world stage. McKinley approached this transition not with haste, but with thoughtful attention to the responsibilities it entailed. His handling of relations with Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines reflected the difficult balance between supporting stability abroad and respecting the aspirations of local populations. Though later generations would debate the policies and decisions of this period, contemporaries often remarked on McKinley's sincerity, his genuine wish to proceed with fairness and restraint. The Spanish-American War, though brief, became a defining moment of his presidency. Yet even here, McKinley's legacy rested less in the conflict itself than in the calm, deliberate way he sought to avoid war until every peaceful path had been explored. When conflict became unavoidable, he handled its course with a consistent emphasis on humane conduct and careful coordination. After the war, his steady administration of new responsibilities helped guide the United States through unfamiliar terrain. His measured approach shaped the early contours of American international policy, and influencing both his immediate successor and the broader trajectory of the coming century. Another aspect of McKinley's legacy lay in his style of leadership, a quality often described as gentle strength. He was known for his listening ear, his aversion to haste, and the quiet dignity he brought to the presidency. Those who worked closely with him spoke of his kindness, his thoughtful questions, and the absence of harshness in his dealings with others. He preferred persuasion grounded in patience, believing that the best decisions emerged from calm reflection rather than forceful insistence. In an era increasingly marked by rapid change and energetic figures on the national stage, McKinley's steadiness provided a grounding influence. Ida's presence in his life and his devotion to her also became part of the story remembered by the nation. Their marriage, defined by mutual care and gentle companionship, revealed a personal dimension to McKinley's character that deepened public affection. Observers often remark that his tenderness toward her reflected the same qualities he brought to public office: thoughtfulness, loyalty, and an unwavering sense of responsibility. In the years after his passing, Ida continued to honor his memory quietly, her own life shaped by the enduring bond they had shared. The McKinley National Memorial, completed in 1907, became a focal point for public remembrance. Its broad steps, rounded dome, and peaceful setting reflected the calm dignity associated with his life. Visitors approached the memorial slowly, often in contemplative silence. Many paused at the summit to look out across the landscape of Canton, imagining the early years of the young attorney who had walked its streets long before he entered national service. The memorial stood not only as a tribute to a president, but as a reminder of the quiet values he embodied. McKinley's influence extended beyond policy and memorialization. His presidency coincided with a period of transition in the character of national leadership. He governed at the threshold of modern America, a moment when technological innovation, economic growth, and global awareness began reshaping the nation's identity. His calm presence helped ease this transition, offering reassurance during a time when the country might easily have felt overwhelmed by rapid change. The orderly expansion of executive responsibilities, the development of systematic administrative practices, and the steady movement toward more structured diplomacy all reflected the tonal influence of McKinley's leadership. His successor, Theodore Roosevelt, ushered in a new era marked by dynamic energy and bold reform. Yet even Roosevelt, so different in temperament, spoke warmly of McKinley's guidance, acknowledging the firm but gentle support he had provided during their shared campaign. McKinley's presidency, though often overshadowed by the more dramatic eras that followed, offered a quiet model of how deliberation and modesty could shape national progress. Later presidents and scholars would look back on his administration as a bridge between 19th century practices and 20th century expectations. In public memory, McKinley's life often appeared not as a sequence of defining moments, but as a continuous expression of steady character. From his youth in Ohio to his years in Congress, from the governorship to the presidency, he approached each responsibility with the same quiet commitment. His decisions were shaped by thoughtful consideration, his interactions characterized by respect, and his demeanor marked by calm self-possession. Even in the most challenging moments, economic uncertainty, international conflict or personal sorrow, he remained grounded in a gentle faith in the possibilities of patient effort and collective goodwill. In time, historians developed a fuller appreciation for the subtler strengths of his presidency. They noted the stability he restored, the cautious but important steps he took in global engagement, and the tone of civility he maintained in public life. They observed that his leadership style, though understated, created conditions in which the nation could grow confidently. His presidency, placed between eras of greater turbulence or sweeping reform, offered a period of grounding that helped the United States enter the new century with balance. As the decades passed, McKinley's legacy endured quietly. It rested not on dramatic transformation, but on continuity, resilience, and steadiness. His life story became a reminder that leadership need not rely on intensity to be effective, that gentle conviction, patient reflection, and unwavering integrity can shape history just as surely as bold innovation. Visitors to his memorial, students studying his presidency, and citizens reflecting on earlier chapters of American life found in McKinley an example of calm service that remained relevant long after his era had passed. In the gentle echo of his life and presidency, the United States found a reminder that progress often emerges most enduringly from the soft rhythms of thoughtful leadership. William McKinley's legacy, serene in tone and steady in substance, lingered quietly into the 20th century, offering a lasting testament to the power of calm direction during times of change. As the life of William McKinley settles gently into memory, the long arc of his journey reveals itself with the soft clarity of a lantern held steadily in the night. His story moves from the quiet streets of Niles, through years of devoted service in war and public life, to the calm rooms of the White House, and finally to the peaceful rise of the McKinley National Memorial. Each chapter rests upon the same foundation: steadiness, sincerity, and a gentle confidence that never sought attention, yet quietly shaped the nation he served. His presidency bridged two eras, one defined by inward growth, the other by expanding horizons. Through economic recovery, emerging international responsibilities, and the unfolding complexities of a new century, McKinley guided the country with a calm that invited reassurance. He believed in gradual progress, in thoughtful decisions, and in the subtle strength of quiet leadership. Even in moments of hardship, his presence remained steady, reflecting a trust that difficulties could be met with patience and dignity. As time carried the nation forward, the memory of his voice, measured, warm, unhurried, lingered like a soft echo across the decades. His life offers a reminder that history is shaped not only by those who speak with force, but also by those who lead with gentleness. And in the stillness of reflection, his legacy continues to unfold with the same calm cadence that marked his life. Let the final notes of this story drift slowly into quiet. Allow the gentle rhythm of his journey, the modest beginnings, the steady rise, the calm devotion, and the peaceful remembrance, to ease the mind into rest. In the soft distance of history, William McKinley's life remains a steady light, guiding the listener gently toward the quiet spaces of the night,